Diane, I see that my camera's not going to work. My apologies. Frick.
It's okay, Caroline, we know you're there.
And Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't called the meeting to order just yet, but I do believe it's 4 o'clock and we have quorum. So I would like to call the meeting for June 28th, 2021 to order. At our May meeting, we began by observing a moment of silence in memory of the children whose remains were discovered on the site of a former Kamloops, BC residential school on May 28th. Sadly, since that time, an additional estimated 751 unmarked graves have been found at yet another site of a former residential school, this time in Saskatchewan on Cowessess First Nation. We recognize that for our members of our Indigenous community, it's been a time of reopening wounds and revisiting past atrocities. I'd like for us to observe another moment of silence in memory and mourning for those who lay buried at these sites. Thank you. I'd like to recognize that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Host Nation. The peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The Ottawa Police Services Board honors the peoples and the land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Ottawa's Indigenous community is diverse, representing many nations, languages, and customs. The Ottawa Police Services Board honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. We are currently broadcasting on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. Given this meeting is being held electronically, I want to caution that there is a possibility of technical difficulties. Should we receive any disruptions, I would ask that everyone remain patient as we work to fix the issue and resume the meeting as soon as possible. In terms of meeting decorum, as each item is presented, I will ask board members if the item is received or carried. If you are joining without video, please say your name before speaking. If you're joining the meeting from a location with background noise, please keep yourself muted until it is time for you to speak. I'd also like to remind everyone to mute their notifications and alerts to avoid any disruptions in the meeting. Following the public meeting, we will have well, actually, we've already had our public meeting this month. We had it earlier today. So this is the final meeting of the day. As we've been indicating at the start of previous meetings, the board continues to trial different start times for its meeting. Today we held our in-camera meeting at noon. We discussed topics pertaining to Canada Day and legal indemnification, as well as one legal matter and 2 personnel matters. It is the board's intention to again trial a noon start time for our in-camera meeting at the end of July, followed by the public meeting at 4 p.m. The board will be in a better position position to consider if a permanent change is required to our meeting times once we receive the public engagement strategy recommendations from PACE, our consultant. So we'll start. One regret, Member Sueda has let us know that he will not be able to participate in our public meeting today. And Member Meehan, I was going to say is here, but her camera's off, but now it's back on, so all good. So confirmation of agenda that the Ottawa Police Services Board confirmed the agenda of the June 28th, 2021 meeting. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. And confirmation of minutes 39 of May 31st, that the Ottawa Police Services Board confirmed minutes 39 of May 31st, 2021. The minutes carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none? No? Okay. Seeing none, we have some public delegates registered to speak today. If you registered to speak on a specific agenda item, we will be holding your delegation until we reach that particular item. Some delegates may be addressing multiple items or items not listed on the agenda, so we will now receive their presentations. A reminder that only those who have registered and were approved to speak will be permitted to address the board. When I call your name, you will be able to turn on your mic and your video. Each delegate has up to 5 minutes to address the board. The list of delegates on the agenda has been updated since last Wednesday when it was originally published. We'll now proceed with the first registered public delegate, and I will call Cassie Slack, and Cassie will be followed by Robin Brown.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Cassie, at 5 minutes, go ahead.
All right. Hi, I'm Cassie, and I'm here again to ask this board to take real action towards removing police from our communities and repairing the trust that has been broken with them. Firstly, I'd like to thank the board for moving this meeting back to a more accessible meeting time for the public, and I hope to see the board commit to making these meetings more accessible for the community going forward. Next, I have some questions about item 3 around the hiring of Strategy Corp. First, I'd like to understand how a PR firm that seems to mainly focus on handling brand image management in the wake of PR scandals, like removing houseless folks from a Home Depot parking lot, is going to help the board review its use of force policies and the police budget. I feel like I might have been able to get answers to this if the proposal for work wasn't hidden and confidential. Can this board explain to us what the scope of work is going to be for Strategy Corp? And can you please release the proposal for work in next month's board meeting agenda so the public has a chance to see it before we pass this? Next, I'm wondering how hiring a firm run by older white folks, one of whom is an ex-police chief, is living up to this board's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in its policy creation process. I'll point out that the previous external company brought in by this board for community engagement is also a firm run by white folks, and that's PACE. Next, I'd like to bring up that item 5, the Canada Day briefing, has no presentation attached to the agenda as of yesterday. This is an accessibility issue, and several of us have brought this up before. It is impossible to delegate on an item when you have no information about what's about to be said. Now, I don't know what you're going to talk about. I'll have to guess at what you might talk about and give my concerns. This year, Indigenous people from across Turtle Island have called for a canceling of Canada Day to mourn the lives of the children murdered at the hands of the Canadian government. Indigenous people are overrepresented in our prison system and are subject to increased surveillance, harassment, and violence by the police. So what policies will this board and the police be putting in place to ensure that Indigenous people will not have to deal with increased police harassment, violence, and incarceration while they mourn and hold ceremony this year? These meetings open with a land acknowledgement every month, but I have yet to see any specific policies brought forth by this board or the police detailing how they will implement the calls to action from the TRC report, which I hope that at the very least every member of this board has read. It's extremely unclear what role the OPS are going to play in the city's reconciliation plan. Next, I have some concerns in item 6, the strategic planning report. First, the neighborhood resource teams are coming up again as a solution to our community's lack of trust in police. I'll remind you that a police officer from one of your previous community policing programs was the one who killed Abdirman Abdi, and the NRTs are just a rebranding of those previous projects. Next, the report talks about the Mental Health Guiding Council. Where can the public see who is included in this guiding council? Lastly, this month we see the addition of intelligence-led policing, including 2 projects, the OPSOC Next Generation Project and Intersect 2.0. I actually wasn't sure what intelligence-led policing was, as I hadn't seen it in reports from previous board meetings. When I looked up what it was, I found that intelligence-led policing urges police to act more like spies, collecting data and surveilling people. I'll read a quote that I found in my own research. Intelligence-led policing has been described as part of a larger trend of blurring the distinction between national security and domestic policing, risking the same perils that have tarnished policing in the past, such as political interference, violating civil liberties, and a greater potential for the abuse of police power with the increased secrecy that intelligence work entails. Now, I can't find any information on either OPSOC Next Generation Project or Intersect 2.0. Can this board explain what those 2 projects are and what impact they will have on the community before passing this? Finally, on July 6th, FEDCO will be meeting to discuss an increase to the police budget. This board has on multiple occasions talked about freezing the police budget and committing to change through action. The community has been loud and clear that we do not want the police getting more money. In fact, we would like to see a decrease in their budget. So given that, will the members of this board be delegating at the FEDCO meeting on July 6th to oppose the raising of the police budget? I would really like answers to these questions that I've asked today, and I'm happy to repeat them if you need. That's all.
Thank you, Cassie. There was a lot in there, so let me start with Strategy Corp. We'll be discussing that when we get to the issue, but the reason that we haven't included their proposal is because it contains proprietary information, and that in a nutshell is why we haven't included it. The Canada Day presentation will be later on in the meeting. In terms of the makeup of the guiding council, Deputy Chief Bell, could you speak about that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Dean. So the Guiding Council is made up of representatives from 6 different local coalitions and mental health practicing groups. Each of those coalitions or groups has identified 2 people to, at the beginning, sit on the Guiding Council as it's being built out. Through discussions with those groups, we are in the process of finalizing, developing and transitioning the Guiding Council from a group that has been supported by us to a group that's going to be supported and guided through the city. So although the members and the membership makeup of it are representatives of those networks, and those networks are the ones that would put those names forward.
Hi, I'm so sorry. That just wasn't my question. Do you mind if I repeat the question? My question was just, where can the public see who is included in the Guiding Council?
Okay.
Networks that are included in the Guiding Council in the board report that was put in January around the formation of it, and then any names that have been supported or forward would be provided through those different networks.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chief Bell. And maybe Acting Deputy Chief McKenna, could you discuss the work that is happening around the TRC calls to action? You're on mute.
Chair Deans, actually, I'll be able to provide that in my verbal.
Okay.
And if there's an additional question about that afterwards, then Deputy McKenna can speak to it. But I recognize there's a question now. So, Joan, I think you got a briefing from Superintendent Renwick, so maybe you can provide an overview of that, but I'll be speaking to it also in my verbal.
Okay.
So we have reviewed the report, and there was 33 law enforcement specific recommendations that was presented to our senior leadership team. Findings were that 11 other recommendations were more focused on situations for the police service boards and CACP, and the creation of a national task force, which would oversee all unresolved cases, to which police services would voluntarily refer cases to. So we had a remaining 22 recommendations, and the review established and confirmed that the Ottawa Police is underway and fully compliant with 12 of the recommendation, which in turn we have 10 further recommendations to consider and achieve compliance on.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, as for the FEDCO building of the overall city budget, I believe the recommendation that's going to FEDCO is just the process for where they will ask for all of the city components of the city budget to be built. Ultimately, for the police services budget, the board will make those decisions. I know that there is a lot of work happening. The Finance and Audit Committee has been working, and we are looking to bring on Strategy Corp to help us as well find savings. We committed to working toward reducing the ask, and we intend to work on that. So regardless of what FEDCO does in terms of where they start, it's where we end up that will matter. And there is a lot of work to be done. And I know the Police Services Board is committed to looking at all aspects as we move forward.
I'm so sorry, that wasn't my question. Do you mind if I repeat it?
Yeah. Yes, I do. It's not a dialogue, and I know you don't like hearing that. That's why we have pace. We're going to try and have a better, but our meetings get long. I have tried to go through all of the items that you raised, and we're going to move on to our next speaker now. So thank you, Cassie. And our next speaker is Robin Brown. And Robin will be followed by Mohammed McGuff. Is Robin on the call? Yeah, there you are. Hi, Robin. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hello again. Actually, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Cassie for her excellent delegation and the questions that she raised. Last month, I told you that the 613-819 Black Hub had launched the Compassion Not Cops campaign to hire consultants to produce a report on a proposed alternative non-police system for responding to people experiencing mental health crises in Ottawa. We launched a campaign on February the 16th with a goal of raising $25,000 to get the study done, and we did it mostly with small community donations. The consultants who did the report will present details on it after me, and we have shared it, the report with all of you and City Council. The report lays out a framework for a system designed, administered, and overseen by the communities it serves, and one that would keep police involvement to an absolute minimum. The plan is based on the overwhelming evidence that divesting from carceral institutions like the police means more funding available for social and preventative services that actually keep us all safer. And in doing so, the plan gives you sound data to justify getting the OPS out of mental health response and more reason to freeze the OPS budget this fall. And remember, the police are asking you to wait 3 years for recommendations from their mental health response review process. Regarding getting cops out of schools, last month I said the Ottawa Carleton District School Board had voted to cancel $95,000 for school resource officers at Ridgemont and Gloucester High Schools. Well, last week, the board went even further and voted to immediately and completely end the presence of police officers in their schools. The OCDSB has clearly shown that they agree with the point I made the last 2 times I spoke. The OPS is simply a bad investment. Let me remind you of 2 things that back up the claim. On June the 6th, I attended an event put on by the Ottawa Black Diaspora Coalition to mark that it's been just over a year since thousands of people took to the streets chanting Black Lives Matter following the murder of George Floyd. The event included a speech by Nadia Ngoto, whose Vanier house the OPS entered unannounced at 5 a.m. on March 24th after the police were given the wrong address for a wellness check on a potentially suicidal man. With her 4 sons standing at her side, Nadia talked about how one of her sons had been awoken early in the morning by the sound of footsteps in the house. And when he slowly opened his bedroom door, was confronted by a man holding a huge rifle. The police had responded to a wellness call in Vanier at 5 a.m. by entering a house unannounced with their guns drawn 2 days after the force announced a limited suspension of no-knock raids. If our system had been in place, 2 unarmed people would have knocked on the Ngoto's door, been told they had the wrong address, and left to find the person in need of care. What they did says a lot about the OPS, and something else. There's something else that says a lot about the OPS, and that is that the union that represents their members, the Ottawa Police Association, is still flying the thin blue line flag at their office, and their president is still Matt Scoff, who was caught on tape calling a female member of the Justice for Abdirahman Coalition a slur so vile, I won't repeat it. Instead, I'll end with 2 questions which we would like written replies for. Firstly, regarding the OPS's neighborhood resource teams, we'd like to know if you have asked the OPS to provide you and the public with a detailed justification of the success criteria they used to justify asking you for the $11 million you gave them to expand the NRT program last year. My second question relates to what Cassie asked about Strategy Corp. Yes, we see that the agenda item number 3 is which the board has a recommendation to hire Strategy Corp Consulting via a sole source contract to lead the OPS's the board's use of review of the OPS's use of force policy. Strategy Corp's website shows it has no Black consultants, and it's unclear if it has any Indigenous ones. Its qualifications and previous work mention nothing about equity or anti-racism work or doing any work focused on marginalized communities. The motion says you'll be working primarily with 3 main Strategy Corp employees, one who's a former police chief and one who's a former advisor to the Ontario Provincial Police Association and the Police Association of Ontario. The motion says Strategy Corp is a, quote, vendor of record with the Ontario government. Now, I guess that most people, including Black and Indigenous folks, don't know what vendor of record is, but even if they did and they knew the Strategy Corp was a vendor of record with the Ontario government, it would make them feel great because that's the same government that repealed almost all the changes to the Police Services Act, the Justice for Abdirahman Coalition successfully fought for under the previous government. So we ask that you immediately make public the detailed criteria you use to make the decision to recommend hiring Strategy Corp, and if just redact the business, whatever, proprietary stuff. Lastly, the one thing I will repeat is our request that you freeze the OPS budget this fall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. And again, there was a lot in your delegation, but there was one thing in particular that I heard that I was hoping maybe Chief Slowly you could expand upon, because it's not the first time I've heard Mr. Brown say this, that police are asking us to wait 3 years for results for our mental health strategy. And that comes as a surprise to me, because I know I've heard Deputy Chief Bell say that there could be some changes as early as this year. So can you just clarify that statement? Mr. Brown keeps saying that it's 3 years. I don't believe it is. So I'm just looking for some clarity.
Thank you, Chair Deans. It's never been said by me or anybody that works for the Ottawa Police Service, something that Mr. Brown has interpreted and repeated ad nauseum. The statement that was originally made was that we're putting forward a 3-year budget around which a wide variety of changes would happen in the organization, investments largely from the approved budgets. What we have said is any sort of major change, for instance, an entire new mental health strategy from prevention to intervention to crisis response, would likely take at a minimum 3 years to plan, pilot, implement, evaluate, and improve to a point that we truly had a new comprehensive mental health strategy for the entire city of Ottawa, and that we would contribute actively to such a process. I have never said, and it's been on record numerous times in this board meeting, numerous times in public meetings, numerous times in public meetings when Mr. Brown himself has participated in direct communication with Mr. Brown. I've been very clear that it's an overall 3-year approach at a minimum to get to a full strategy, not one that we would simply wait 3 years before we started any level of implementation. Hopefully that clarifies the issue for you, Chair Deans.
Thank you, Chief Slowly. Member Smallwood.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Brown had mentioned the issue about the CROs, and there's obviously some expectation that the cancelling of the CROs is going to assist the board in its budget deliberations. And so one of the things that I think is clear to me is that the canceling of that is not the same as reducing the staffing of the OPS. Those members that are currently or were currently doing that work, we have employment and collective agreements that have to be adhered to. Perhaps the chief can give the board some indication of what the implications are with respect to the board and the budget process of the potential canceling of the SROs or CROs. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Smallwood. Just for clarity, what's been canceled is the SRO program by the OCDSB. We still have active partnerships with all four education boards. Our SROs are still working actively and contributing meaningfully to the safety of the schools and the three remaining school boards. OCDSB has actually sent me documentation today from the director of the board indicating their desire to continue to maintain the relationship and partnership, both at the statutory level as well as in an ongoing development of a broader youth strategy, which we've talked about at the previous board meeting. We still have a statutory requirement, as does the OCDSB and all four of the boards, to work in partnership on a range of issues, from planning for active attackers and school lockdowns through to mandatory requirements to call the police for certain high-level areas of public safety. And again, within the documentation that we've received from the OCDSB today and in previous days, it is clear that they want to continue a working relationship with the OPS and develop a new and expanded relationship, one that will be developed differently than the past, but one that still maintains that relationship. I've yet to fully review all the documents and all the elements of the motion that was passed at the OCDSB board meeting last week. There are some problematic areas, but I've only literally just recently received them as of noon hour today. I would be prepared to come back to the board next month and provide a deeper analysis of the motions that have been passed and the future of the relationship with OCDSB and the other boards.
Anything further, Member Smallwood?
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Sorry, Chair Dean's apologies, but the SROs, the police officers who delivered that work in partnership with OCDSB and who work for the other boards, as we consider what the future of our youth strategy will be, the deployment of those officers will be in regards to youth strategy. They will be in regards to the expansion of our neighborhood resource team, and they will be focused on community building as they have been for the majority of their time in the SRO program. Those resources are in high demand for a number of as yet unmet demands that are against the police service. Those resources are incredibly valuable and will continue to be deployed to the benefit of the community.
Okay, thank you. Member Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Deans. Just a comment that I do agree that any consultants the Ottawa Police Service Board hire should be done with a diversity lens and consider EDI. So going forward, I think that's very important for us and actually for the OPS as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Brown, for being here today. We'll move along to Mohammed Miguel, and Mohammed will be followed by Kim Sheldrick.
Hey guys, hello. How's it going?
Good. Hi, Mohammed. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi. So thanks for having me today. I am excited to share my thoughts and my opinion towards the Ottawa Police Service's new developments. So my name is Mohammed. I am a Black Ottawa resident, and I'm very concerned of these new developments. So I am worried about the increase of the OPS budgeting of 3% because it clearly violates the initial agreement, or I would say the initial public demand of freezing the Ottawa Police Service Board, the Ottawa Police Service budget, because they don't need more money. Let's be honest, because the more money you give them, the more the residents are more concerned and troubled by the increased police officers' presence, and it leaves us very anxious about ourselves. So as you all know, over years of protests in Ottawa, after thousands of residents, coming out public meetings and sharing their thoughts on this subject, the Ottawa Police Board said that they would consider. You guys said that you guys would consider freezing the police budget in 2022, and now you are failing to comply to this, in our point of view, and again, we refuse and we will not stand by this. So we hope and want you guys to think through before allowing this to go through. Not only that, it is very disrespectful, I would say, to the Black and Indigenous community, but now Muslim communities are more concerned about their life and their well-being and safety when they go outside. So you guys are spending more money on public safety, increasing police surveillance, protection, and yet we are still feeling, scared of any violent crimes happening to us. Now, I've heard about the City Hall choosing to, the Ottawa Finance and Economic Committee is looking to increase property taxes by 3%. I mean, let's be honest, that money or whatever money you guys give to police, the cops are just going to pocket that. There's not going to be any productive means of that investment. So it's better for you guys to put more money in social services and mental health services than putting more money into the police pockets. So, and I've read an article earlier this month or this year, out of maybe 2,000 employees of the Ottawa Police Service Board are making six-figure earnings when the rest of the community are making less of the poverty line. And this makes me and others extremely angry because you guys are spending more money into a already congested department instead of reinvesting that money to the community, more development and housing, mental health, social services. So in all saying is that the more money the Ottawa Police has, the less we in our communities feel safer. So we disagree and we strongly stand against this decision of increasing the Ottawa Police Service budget. And we want you guys to invest into the communities, whether if it's housing development or mental health or social services. So again, thank you for this. I also want to take a few seconds to say thank you to Horizon Ottawa, as well as CAMS, which is a coalition against more police surveillance. So thank you all again for representing us in the community and voicing our concerns. Thank you.
And thank you, Mohammed, for being here today and for sharing your perspective with us. We appreciate it. Member Johnson.
Yes, just maybe a quick update from Mohammed. And yes, thank you for coming today and speaking to us. So Vice Chair Smallwood and myself have been, as was announced at an earlier meeting, in a budget working group, really working hard to freeze the 2022 budget. So I just wanted to share that work is going on. We spent many hours in it in meetings with Deputy Chief Bell and others, and Chief Slowly. So just to let you know that work is going on, and we really take that motion seriously.
Okay, so I mean, we're a long way through that we have to go through the budget process. We want to do some meaningful public consultation. We want to hear from all aspects of the community. We need to consider how we can meet our mandate to deliver quality, effective policing in the community. And we obviously want to do it as efficiently as we can. And we want to look for ways where perhaps we can deliver part of the services in a different way than we have in the past. And that's a lot of work to do. The board has said we will make our best efforts, and there's a lot of strategies that we're employing to make those efforts, including the one that Member Johnson just spoke about. So we hear you. We are working hard on this issue, and we will work with the community as we move through all all the time until we get to setting the 2022 budget. So thank you very much again for being here today. We're going to move to Kim Sheldrick, and Kim will be followed by Sam Harsh.
Okay, unfortunately, my video is not working, but can you hear me?
We can hear you, Kim. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Kim Sheldrick. I am a street outreach worker and a social service worker, but I'm not representing any of my places of employment or volunteering for this. I'm here to speak about the mental health response strategy and the report that was presented January 25th of this year. What I am interested in having within this city is more effective, more efficient use of services that will reach more people that are dealing with homelessness, substance use disorder, and mental health issues. More of a coordinated response that can increase safety and decrease crime. Integrate some of the programs and the services that we already have in place. I did send forward a list of the outreach services that we do currently have in the city that I'm aware of. But what I am thinking is that we don't need to start at scratch and reinvent the wheel. We already have outreach programs, but what I'm suggesting is that we come up with a 24/7 program that is a mental health response along with outreach. So any non-emergency incidents, mental health incidents, dealings with intoxication or substance use, non-aggressive, non-violent behavior, or harm if there's no intervention, calls could be rerouted to this mobile unit that would consist of 2 staff members that would run 24/7. The staffing could be done with social workers, social service workers, nurses, shelters workers that have all been trained with first aid, CPR, AED, NBCI, trauma-informed care, mental health first aid, cultural safety courses, because it is important that we include the Indigenous and gender diverse population, and suicide intervention training. This has been shown to be very successful in different areas of the world. Cahoots in Oregon, it's the crisis assistance helping out on the streets is a mobile team that provides outreach and mental health response. It's been running for years. They have information available to help other cities. There's a 24/7 crisis diversion team in Edmonton. There's different teams that are similar in Denver, Houston, Stockholm, and all across Canada. And just recently, I reached out to Reach Out Response Network in Toronto, and they are part of the International Crisis Response Association. And they have information that they are willing to share with other cities to try and set something up in more of an outreach 24/7 mobile unit. Because in the city here, yes, we do have some mobile mental health teams. I have had to call them, and what they have said is call the police, have them arrested, and then they will contact us. That is not how it should go. If somebody is in crisis, we should have a team that will come out to where that person is and help whoever is on site. Something like this could be a collaboration with the police services, with the city, and with outside sources, with funding coming from all of them. But my concern is that we don't need to start from nothing. We can look at these other examples that are out there and that are functioning well and have been for years, and see if we can kind of turn that around to something that's unique for Ottawa that includes mental health response as well as street outreach.
Is that it, Kim?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, and thank you for your suggestions. I know that there is a lot of work being done, and we are looking at best practices from other jurisdictions as well as we build a Made in Ottawa solution. So you make a lot of good points, and I think that all of the people involved in developing a Made in Ottawa solution are aware of the best practices, and we will certainly no sense reinventing the wheel. To the extent where we can use best practices from other jurisdictions, we will certainly look at that. Member Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Kim, for your presentation. I was struck when I read your list of the very thing you're saying. Is I thought it seems that to a certain degree we have a lot of the resources out there that are absolutely needed for that more upstream approach to what ails society at times. And so I wondered if you could give us any idea. Is there one thing that you see that's stopping a more collaborative approach? Because it certainly seems like we have some of those resources there. And is there anything you can help us with and tell us why? Because I know, and I've looked at the responses and I've looked at the setups in other cities, and they do seem to have a more coordinated approach. So is there anything you can help us with that you would see that one thing that we could do to try to have a better, more collaborative approach to this?
In my opinion, it would be communication. Yes, we do have quite an extensive list, but a lot of them don't know that the others exist. They don't know what times they are. And then it's very piecemeal. It's little pockets of it out there. Like I said, I'm out on the streets every day with an organization, and one of the things I task myself with is reaching out to the other organizations to find out what they're doing, to find out where the hotspots are that day, to find out what people are needing. Because there's no sense in 5 different outreach teams going to one encampment and then another encampment is being ignored. We need to do something to be able to get these people housed rather than encampments, but we also need to make the communication there and fill in the gaps. I personally had phone calls from organizations at about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning asking if I can go and check on somebody because there's no outreach out at that time. So it's
okay. So, Chair, if I may, just one other thing is, who would you see leading this sort of coordinating it? Who do you think should be the focal point to make sure that there aren't 4 different responses and there aren't everybody's not out there trying to sort of do the same thing at the same time? Like, how do we make sure that there is that coordination? Who quarterbacks it?
From what I read in the report from January, there is the 5 or 6 groups that you had mentioned in the guiding council. They could pull people from the larger outreaches and create kind of their own communication committee that would run it separately, but also in conjunction with the city and the police services.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, Chair.
Okay, and thank you, Kim, for being here today. Seeing no further questions, we will move on to Sam Hirsch, and Sam will be followed by Julia Hamer.
Can you hear me?
We can, Sam. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, I mean, I'm happy to hear about the commitment to the motion that was made at the last in the November meeting. I mean, I hope that continues. I do think, and I'm a bit confused by response, because I guess I'll ask if you can respond to this question later on about about FEDCO deciding and setting the budget parameters, because it's not really clear to me how the Ottawa Police Services Board can sort of overrule FEDCO and decide otherwise on these parameters if they're passed. And also, it's sort of problematic as well, because if these parameters pass, then it'll close the door to a reduction. And we could still see, in my understanding, that's what it seems, and we could still see a budget increase. And that's not what communities were promised. Communities were promised either a freeze or a reduction through that working group. And I'm glad to hear that there's been updates and that Member Johnson and Member Smallwood are working towards that. But I would really, caution against these parameters. They're problematic and they lead the way to another increase. And I don't really have great confidence in FEDCO or, quite frankly, the rest of council to follow the actions of the Police Services Board in advocating for a reduction or a freeze. But I will say, if there is an increase that passes, because there is still that that possibility, then that would be a huge affront to communities, a huge affront to particularly racialized communities who put in a lot of emotional labor coming to this board and telling them why that the reason isn't right to do this. And I mean, there's a lot of examples of it. I don't have to give in terms of decreasing the police budget, because the police do a very good job of explaining that themselves through their actions. What I want to say, and I want to reiterate, is that this is not a radical opinion. It's not an opinion just shared by protesters and activists. It's not a minority opinion. Just look at what happened during, as we discussed already today, at the Ottawa Carleton District School Board meeting the other day. Trustees voted overwhelmingly to end police presence in schools, and why? Because a majority of parents and students wanted it to end. And as I heard Chief Stoley talk about a youth strategy run by the police, but quite clearly, voting down the SRO's program was a negation of that. I mean, I don't see where the need is for that, to be quite frank. And lastly, I mean, what I want to say, and I know this is quite a bit of a short delegation today, is, Chair Deans, and I don't think I remember Mian is here anymore, but I often hear you very rightfully so calling out. Sorry, no worries. Calling out our mayor for his undemocratic behavior, and calling out very eloquently developer influence at City Hall, and making many calls for accountability. But I'm sure delegates here would greatly appreciate it if you showed that same passion for accountability and that same moral obligation to residents when it came to holding police accountable. This police force does not deserve a dime more. They don't deserve an increase, and certainly not more than public health during a global pandemic. So, what we expect of you, Chair Deans, and also Member Johnson and Member Smallwood, since you were saying it about, about this working group, is to show up at the FEDCO meeting on July 6th and talk to them about why we need to oppose an increase or oppose, and support a freeze and a reduction. We expect you as community members. We will be there, and we expect you to be there to talk to them about the work of the Police Services Board and why an increase shouldn't be supported. So that's all we ask, and I think I echo a lot of folks who are here today as well, and I'm also excited to hear the I know folks from Vivek Research is here today, so I'm excited to hear about their report on non-police alternatives to mental health. So we hope to see you folks there, members of the Police Services Board, at the FEDCO meeting on July 6th, speaking out against a budget increase. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sam. I just want to perhaps take a minute and go over the budget process so that members of the community can understand it. The FEDCO and Council set what they call the budget direction. It's a high-level direction upon which the work begins to set the budget for the entire City of Ottawa. But the City of Ottawa Council does not set the police services budget. This board sets the police services budget. We ask council for a certain amount of money. They can say yes or no, but they do not set our budget. We set our own budget. When we committed last year, having listened to many delegations, that we would, to the extent possible, make our best efforts to reduce the budget ask. We have committed to doing that. We are working to do that. We intend to do a wholesome public consultation. And I've heard a number of people say that that's what the community wants. I mean, we want to know what the community wants, because we do hear from different groups in the community different things, and we need to provide quality, effective policing in the City of Ottawa in as cost-effective manner as possible. And as I said at the beginning of the meeting, to the extent where we can find better ways of providing service than we have in the past, and perhaps more cost-effective ways, we will do that. And we want to send the right response to the right call. And there is a lot of effort, a lot of work that is going on to achieve that goal. Where will that end up in terms of a dollar figure? I don't think any of us know that right now, but we are listening and we're working on finding efficiencies and finding improvements as we move forward. Member Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reply to a couple of things that Sam had mentioned. First, with respect to the budget, as has been mentioned a couple of times, that Bev Johnson and myself are working towards the board's direction with respect to the budget. And I want to assure you personally that the chair made it very clear to us that it is her expectation that we do our best to meet the direction given and set by the board. That has not changed. There's been no watering down. It has been extremely clear to us that the chair's expectation is we will do everything we can. And that's what Member Johnson and I have been doing. And as well, Councillor King has joined in on some of our discussions and meetings, but we are looking everywhere we can. And one of the challenges we face is that we're dealing with policing. And to be quite frank, I don't know. And the police boards are set up not with people who have expertise in policing, but people who are community members. And so we don't understand always where and how budgets are put together. And one of the reasons we hired Strategy Corp, even though we were well aware that there would be some criticism of the makeup of Strategy Corp, the reason we hired them is because they know how police budgets are put together. They understand where, if there are savings to be found, where they may be found. And when we have ideas and we want to bounce them off somebody who can tell us, will this work? They're a group that has that knowledge. They understand the Police Act and they understand what the parameters are that we have to work within. So it was a deliberate choice of hiring a group that had the expertise that could answer our questions when we were pushing to see where we could make savings. So I just want to assure you that it, in the event that this is passed, that they are the ones that are approved, because it hasn't happened yet. If they are the ones that are approved, that's the reason why that they would have been chosen, and that's the help that they would give us. But nothing has changed in terms of our intention to make sure that we do everything we can to meet the board's direction. So I hope that helps somewhat in terms of where we're.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, sorry, just before I leave, that we did produce a long report, our Ottawa alternative budget, 17 different community groups, the Ottawa Coalition for People's Budget, that proposes a way that we can cut police funding. So I think some members have already read that, but I would encourage members to read that if they want to see how they can reduce or freeze funding for the police budget. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and just to be clear, there is a recommendation on today's agenda to hire Strategy Corp. We have not made that decision yet, but the recommendation is there to hire Strategy Corp. Okay, so moving on then to Julia Hamer, and then Julia will be followed by 4 delegations who I understand have a PowerPoint presentation. And I'm just looking to any of those 4, Robbins, Simia, Nora, and Inez, to tell me, are you all wanting to have 20 minutes to share the 4, or are you going to go 5, 5, 5, 5? So you can answer that when we start, but we'll hear from Julia Hamer next.
All right, hello everybody. The first thing I want to speak to today is the upcoming FEDCO meeting, although I appreciate that we've addressed it a number of times in different ways today. Like others who have spoken though, I want to remind the board to your commitment to either freezing or reducing the budget, and also that your colleagues on City Council have committed to supporting the board members here in the decisions that you make. Board members, specifically Diane Ralston and Carol Ann, I think it should make you angry that your commitments to the 2022 budget are being disregarded by your peers on City Council, who do not sit on this board and have not been here listening to community members every month. We've seen glaring examples recently of the ways that City Council operates in unjust and corrupt ways. Diane, you in particular, I know have spoken about this recently. And I think that you should be furious that your experience on this board and the board's decision to freeze or reduce the budget is seemingly irrelevant to this motion at next Tuesday's FEDCO meeting. You have sat here meeting after meeting, learning from the community members about the vital need not to increase the budget. And if I were you, I would be deeply insulted and angry that someone was trying to push through a motion that flew in the face of the work that has been done here in these meetings. I want to urge all board members to sign up as delegates at the FEDCO meeting and to challenge the motion presented to increase the 2022 budget, both based on your commitments to freeze the budget and your learned understanding of why a budget increase is not needed for the police in the city. Advocate for the money to be redirected elsewhere where it will do real good. Public health, for instance, who did not get the budget increase they requested this year, but be mad that the thing that you are here to do, someone else is trying to go over your head to do it differently. The second thing I want to speak to is item number 5 on the agenda, which is the candidate day briefing. I want to echo what another delegate has said, and that it is disappointing and unacceptable from an engagement perspective that there's no report included for this item. So my delegation here is predictive. But what will the role of OPS be on this day? We know that there will be Indigenous-led actions on this day, as well as a widely attended anti-mask, anti-lockdown rally. We know that the police consistently respond to Black and Indigenous-led actions with force and surveillance, and we know from the letters of commendation included on item 11 in this agenda that the police respond to anti-mask, anti-lockdown protests with levity and kindness, despite the very real threat to public safety and ties to white nationalist ideology. Rather than reacting after the fact, I would like this board, in their oversight capacity, to take a stand with Indigenous communities who are grieving for their children and their families, and to understand that heavy policing and surveillance of these events is part of Canada's ongoing violence against Indigenous peoples. Please don't make us have to come back to the next meeting to speak only about the harm caused by the police during these actions. Again, there is no presentation included for this agenda item, so my questions are going to have to be broad, but what are the OPS doing to respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action? In 2018, the city put out their own reconciliation action plan that OPS is quick to say that they are partners in and have ongoing commitments to, but I personally can't find those commitments detailed anywhere. I would love to hear and learn more about how OPS is committed to these actions and how their approach to this year's Canada Day is shaped by and informed by a commitment to those calls to action. I encourage board members to push for this information as well, especially if you've been shaken or concerned about the recent uncovering of mass grave sites across this land recently. Finally, I have 2 questions from other delegates. Could this board please explain the OPSOC Next Generation Project and Intersect 2.0, what those projects are and what impact they will have on the community? And finally, could the board please speak to the social media policies of Twitter accounts affiliated with OPS, given that the OPS Guns and Gangs unit representing the Ottawa Police on Twitter are blocking members of the public? In response to some questions about social media from the Coalition Against More Surveillance, OPS presented a social media strategy to this board a couple of months ago. Within the strategy, is there direction around whether or not public OPS accounts can block residents? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Julia, for your delegation. Again, there was quite a bit in there. I'm looking to you, Chief Slowly. Did you want to speak to any of those issues?
Chair, there were a number of items there. It's entirely up to you if you want me to delve into any of them. I'm happy to speak to the Truth and Reconciliation piece and my verbal, as I've said. Should the board want a more fulsome update on that, I believe Member Johnson had sent an email requesting that. We could provide that if you want to form that as an inquiry, we can provide that as a more fulsome update to the board at a future board meeting. In regards to the projects that have been named, the ILP project, the Intelligence-Led Policing Project, while I would disagree with the very surface level research that a previous delegate had talked about, I would agree in general that the use of intelligence-led policing by municipal police services for the most part over the last 15 to 20 years has not achieved outcomes. That is exactly why we're reviewing and redoing our approach to intelligence-led policing. And in fact, we're going to be calling it community safety well-being. It will be aligned to the current Police Services Act, the requirements of municipalities and regional municipalities to develop community safety well-being plans where the police do not lead it but support it, where the public has much greater empowerment and actual ownership over the plan, the implementation of it, and the evaluation of it. Our intelligence-led policing strategy going forward will be aligned to the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and that is why we are redoing our intelligence-led policing plan. Intersect is an old term for how the different national capital region policing and national security agencies operate to provide safety within Canada's capital. It includes how we communicate, coordinate, and work with agencies like the RCMP, like the Parliamentary Protection Services, Correctional Services Canada, all of the various levels of municipal, provincial, and federal policing and public safety agencies. It is a coordination communication effort. We needed to make sure that we have financial funding to provide for that. So it is both sustainability and coordination, and sustainability and funding. That is the review that is undertaken there. Hopefully that demystifies what those two projects are about. And again, if there's an inquiry in there that you want us to provide more detailed information to this board, we'd be happy to do so.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And thank you, Julia, for being here today. We'll now move on to Robin Shaban. And maybe, Robin, you can just let me know how this PowerPoint presentation, is it going to be done in 4 parts?
Hello, we'll each take 5 minutes.
Okay, so we'll start with you, Robin. Go ahead.
Can everyone see the slides?
We can.
Excellent. My name is Robin Shaban, and I am calling from unceded Algonquin territory. I'm an economist at Vivek Research, and I will be presenting a non-police mental health crisis response alongside my colleagues. This strategy seeks to remove all responsibilities related to wellness checks and crisis calls from the OPS. In this presentation, I will explain why we can confidently state, with the backing of empirical research, that the police-led reform that the OPS is undertaking to restructure its mental health crisis response will fail the Ottawa community. I will also explain why Ottawa deserves better, and my colleagues, who will speak after me, will explain how we can achieve these better solutions. First, I would like to begin with some context. The Ottawa Police Service is failing our community. There are many reasons for this, historical and systemic, but right now, the OPS is actively harming the Ottawa community. Even OPS knows they are failing the community, which is why they have been pressured into finding a new way to respond to mental health crises. But do we believe that the same people who killed Abi Rahman Abdi and Greg Ritchie without facing any consequences can provide the safety and security our community is entitled to? More recently, a Black family was traumatized during a failed wellness check when 10 armed police officers entered the wrong home in the middle of the night. This violence not only caused harm to a family, but it also illustrates the so-called support that people in crisis can expect to receive from the police. We anticipate that the OPS's new mental health strategy will feature a combination of 4 common police-led reforms: increased training for officers, increased diversity among new hires and promoted staff, increased accountability for crimes committed while in uniform, and investments in surveillance equipment, such as body cameras. None of these reforms will keep us safe. Increased training does not keep people safe from police officers because training that they receive is inherently harmful. In these trainings, people living with mental illness are depicted as violent and unpredictable, and that fosters fear among officers. Officers are indoctrinated with the notion that their job is extremely violent, and their first responsibility is to make it home safely at the end of their shift. Therefore, the training itself is what leads many officers to opt in with lethal force within seconds of arriving to the scene. Increased diversity does not make policing safer, because the problem has never been individual officers, but in fact the entire system. Holding police accountable for their crimes does not prevent the crime from occurring in the first place, nor does it provide justice to the victim or their loved ones. The SIU routinely excuses police murder, and the level of protection awarded to police under the Police Service Act makes additional spending on accountability essentially useless. Furthermore, we know that harsher sentencing does not impact crime rates among civilians. Therefore, we have little reason to believe that police would respond differently to legal incentives. Finally, calling for equipment such as body cameras means additional investments in the police service, and therefore fewer investments in preventative services. Many fatal police incidents are already recorded on cameras by bystanders, yet police are not held accountable. It is incoherent to believe that police-worn equipment that can be willingly turned off, turned away from the scene, or conveniently lost will somehow fill the gaps in our policing system. There are alternatives to police forces in many cities across North America, such as Toronto, Edmonton, Eugene, Oregon, Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg. These responses are known as mobile crisis response teams. Generally, they feature 2 trauma-informed, unarmed individuals. There have been no reported deadly interactions from the use of mobile crisis response teams. The person in crisis is not re-traumatized by the interaction, and the situation is safer for individuals in crisis, bystanders, and first responders. In fact, many first responders testified that they have never felt endangered while responding to a person in crisis, whereas police officers report being afraid going into interactions. These services are extremely cost-effective. Less spending on emergency response means more available money to invest in preventative care. We need to shift our focus from crime to harm. Reducing harm keeps us safe. Reducing crime at all costs does not. To do this, we need to reallocate funding from the Ottawa Police towards services that ensure that nobody becomes a perpetrator and therefore nobody becomes a victim. Thank you.
And thank you, Robin. And yet that was exactly 5 minutes. We'll move on now to Samia Ahmed. Samia, you're muted. If you could just unmute. There you go. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Samia and I'm an economist at Vivek Research. I will be discussing the program framework and strategic overview of the mental health crisis response. Just one sec. The non-police mental health crisis response was developed based on community consultation and outreach. In our consultations, the most common response to police involvement in crisis response was that police cause harm and they should not be a part of mental health care. All surveyed groups stated that they would not be comfortable with having 911 call for them if they were in a mental health crisis. The OPS has failed the people of Ottawa, and they rightly deserve proper mental health care now. Despite increased training and investment, the police model of mental health care uses criminalization and institutionalization to punish behaviors related to mental illness. The OPS budget needs to be reallocated in order to not cause any more harm. This non-police response program will completely will not use any forms of punishment and is rooted in understanding human rights-based approaches. Like Robin mentioned before me, a non-police response follows the framework of successful alternatives in cities like Toronto, Edmonton, Thunder Bay, and Eugene, Oregon. The core focus of this program is to provide emergency mental health care and mental health response, which means detasking the police with wellness checks and crisis calls. Instead, non-police responders will respond to wellness checks, crisis calls, and overdoses and public intoxication and disturbances, because those are closely correlated behaviors with people experiencing mental health crises. Accessible 24/7 and available in multiple languages, first responders will receive requests by phone, text, and through social media. Unlike the police, the first responders have shared lived experience and they have similar backgrounds, they are culturally responsive, and most importantly, they are unarmed and trauma-informed. Police can never be trauma-informed because inherent things like wearing a uniform and carrying a weapon is traumatizing to people. And that is something that is is by default. The team is comprised of first responders and nurse practitioners who carry water, food, and other essential resources. They differ from police because they are able to provide medical care as opposed to sending someone off to a hospital, and most importantly, they are not bound by the Police Services Act, which holds officers above the law and hinders any meaningful accountability. The program will have 3 physical locations that will run 24 hours and can be used as a safe gathering space where life-affirming services are available. This is because police officers do not bring people to safe spaces. Unlike the Ottawa Police, this service can help the entire Ottawa community rather than punishing people who are in crisis. It reduces the likelihood of people re-interacting with the system or being criminalized by addressing the root causes of crisis and including follow-up care, cross-cultural healing, and cultural competency. Unlike with the police, individuals experiencing a crisis will see themselves and their lived experiences reflected in those providing care. The service will be governed by a coalition of grassroots community organizations under the leadership of people with lived experience. Organizations that represent various community groups will be the first point of contact for community members to provide feedback and also seeking information on the service. And those wanting to provide feedback will have direct access to the people running the program. Unlike the OPSB, the board of directors will be comprised of people with lived experience, including individuals who have experienced or who currently experience homelessness, incarceration, forced hospitalization.
Sonia, your 5 minutes is up. If you could just wrap up, please.
Okay, I'll finish my sentence. Individuals from racialized groups, particularly Black and Indigenous individuals, will be prioritized in leadership positions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on now to Nora Ottenhoff.
Hi, thank you. I believe Hannah is going to share my slides for me, so we'll just go to the first slide.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So hello everyone, my name is Nora and I will be taking you through the program costing. So if Hannah can go to just the first main slide. So the program will undergo a 5-year expansionary period during which the service capacity will expand through the acquisition of additional vehicles and the hiring of additional service providers. As you can see here, in year 1, we estimate that the total annual cost for the program will be just over $5 million. And by year 6, following the expansionary period, the estimated total annual cost for the program will be just under $11.7 million. This figure will support 104 staff and 30 service vehicles. So we'll go to the next slide. The service's primary area of cost is wages. So in year 1, wages will account for 76% of total cost, rising to 87% by year 5 or by year 6 onwards. And we'll go to the next slide. So to break down wages a little bit further, we'll just discuss the 5 distinct types of employees the service plans on hiring. I'll speak to 3 of them, as Samia already walked you through some of their responders. All efforts will be made to hire first responders whose image and lived experiences reflect those who they will be providing care to. Lived or living experience with mental health, drug use, homelessness, sex work, and more will be considered assets. Drivers will be employed as an accommodation for first responders who cannot for any reason safely operate a vehicle themselves. Drivers will transport first responders to and from the scene of a call, but will not be responsible for providing care to the individual in crisis. And while drivers will not undergo the same first aid training, they will receive anti-racism, anti-discrimination, and bystander intervention trainings. Nurse practitioners will be employed to provide more immediate and involved and/or continued care. Nurse practitioners will be stationed at one of our physical locations and will be able to prescribe and do minor medical procedures on site. So we'll go to the next slide, please. The costs for the physical locations are outlined here. As you can see, rent and related costs, including utilities, internet, and building security, will be the most costly expenses. This is followed by clinic supplies, meaning the equipment necessary for the nurse practitioner to do their job. Of the approximately 61,000 quoted here in the table, however, approximately 50,000 will be one-time or infrequent costs, items such as examination benches, medical storage units, etc., and 11,000 will be annually recurring costs. So we'll go to the next slide. So I'd like to use the rest of my time to contextualize the program spending with a comparison to current OPS spending. So OPS's net operating budget for 2021 was quoted at $332.5 million, and this is an increase from 3.2 million, from the previous year. Of this $332.5 million, 1.5 or only 0.45% of the total budget is being put towards this mental health response strategy. So this figure, in addition to the estimated 2.3 million currently spent on mental health interventions, puts OPS spending on mental health at only 3.8 or 1.14% of the total annual budget. This despite mental health crises being linked to an estimated 15% of calls to police. And it should be noted that this 15% estimate is likely very low, as OPS's reporting system fails to properly account for mental health as a confounding factor to crime. So these figures clearly demonstrate that there is a need for increased spending on mental health response. And as my colleagues before me outlined, this increase in spending needs to be under the purview of the community itself, not OPS. Next slide, please. So to end, I would like to highlight how spending could be reallocated away from the OPS budget to better serve the people of Ottawa. Annually, OPS spends approximately $500,000 on dry cleaning. This sum could fund all three of the service's physical location costs, save for clinical costs for 1 year. What OPS spends on clothing allowance could purchase 9 vehicles for this service. OPS's annual budget for meal allowances would furnish and provide personal hygiene and care items for 1 physical location for 1 year. And finally, OPS's spending on annual liability claims could pay the wages of 13 mental health first responders. What we are asking is for the funding slotted for the OPS mental health response and the funds set aside for the expected annual budget increase to be reallocated towards this non-police mental health response strategy. The people of Ottawa deserve better than what the OPS currently offers in terms of mental health care, and this is a path to do better. Thank you.
Sorry, I think I was on mute. Thank you, Nora. We'll move to Inez Hillel. Hi, Inez.
Hi, just sharing my screen for the presentation. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Perfect. So my name is Inez, and I'm an economist at Vivic Research. And 613-819 Black Hub funded this work through community donations. So we asked that police budgets be frozen, since more public funds do not need to be diverted for the police's consultation process. I'm here today to talk about the legal framework under which we can reallocate funding from the Ottawa Police towards our community. The strategy requires reallocating funding from 2 components of the Ottawa Police Service: 911 dispatching services and mental health crisis response. By this, we mean when you call 911, the person responding to the call is not trained by the Ottawa Police Service. And when a person experiencing a mental health crisis, there's no police present at the scene. So this would be for wellness checks, public situations called in by bystanders, and Form 1 and Form 2 apprehensions under the Mental Health Act. So before we get into the pathways to define the police, we would like to remind everyone, including the board themselves, what their role is and who they're meant to serve. So the Ottawa Police Service Board is a civilian body that governs the police and represents community interests. They're responsible for setting the objectives and priorities.
Naz, we're having trouble hearing you. You're cutting out a little bit. I'm wondering if you should turn your camera off.
Does that make the audio a little clearer?
Much better. Thank you.
So the current legislation that governs the Ottawa Police Service is the Police Service Act, which is set to be repealed shortly and replaced by the Community Safety and Police Act. The following information that I will present is true under both legislations. Currently, in Ontario, there is no legislation that governs who must provide 911 dispatching services. Therefore, there's no legal reason that prevents the City of Ottawa from choosing a different service provider to handle dispatch. The only barrier to detasking the Ottawa Police Service Board from 911 dispatch is the contract the City of Ottawa has signed. Therefore, we request that this police board, as a civilian body, share the terms of their contract with the public. Furthermore, there's nothing in the law that states that the police must provide a mental health crisis response. Therefore, there is no reason that they need to be funded to provide this. And in fact, the law only states that City Council must provide the municipal police board with enough funding to provide adequate and effective policing. That purposefully vague description does not necessarily include mental health crisis response. Therefore, we're reiterating the calls made by many to freeze and if possible, reduce the OPS budget this fall. So in order to understand how that's possible, I'm going to just quickly review the process for approving the budget. So in theory, what happens is the Ottawa Police Service Board develops and submits estimates of the amount they deem necessary to police the municipality and pay for the board's operations. Then City Council considers those estimates and presents the board with the budget. They do not need to set the budget to match the estimates presented. In practice, though, the Ottawa Police Service Board sets the strategic direction for the police, and then the chief and his staff draft the budget. City Council votes to approve or reject that budget, and that is overseen by the board and costed out by the police service, which leaves the police board with two options and City Council with one. First, the police board can determine that mental health crisis response is not within the strategic direction of the OPS. Second, the police board can strike line items from the budget estimates provided by the chief and his staff that criminalize mental illness. If the police board is serious about taking direction from community, they can prevent spending on police response to mental health crisis by cutting spending on the mental health unit, community policing, and neighborhood resources teams. Finally, City Council can reject the proposed police service budget increase and even force a reduction in expenditure on policing. Municipalities are not permitted to cut specific line options, but they have the very significant power of saying no to any increase. Furthermore, City Council can ask the police board to account for how much of its budget is spent specifically on responding to mental health crises in the coming year. To summarize, we ask that the board share the 911 service delivery contract. We demand that they set strategic plans in line with community asks and define mental health crisis response as beyond the scope of this police force. We ask that the Ottawa Police strike any line items pertaining to the criminalization of mental health in subsequent police budgets. And if the board fails the community they exist to serve, we ask that City Councillors vote no to any police budget increase this fall. Earlier in this meeting, Diane Dean said, if it's not where we start, it's where we end up that matters. But we ask that this board consider getting off to a good start in terms of community response. We will end by saying that this is just a first step. To truly commit to public safety, we need to abolish the Ottawa Police because real alternatives exist that can keep our community safe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Inez, and thank you to Robin, Samia, Nora, and Inez for your presentation. I'm going to take questions to all of you, but members of the board, if you could tell me to whom you are directing your question, that would be great. We'll start with Member Smallwood.
Thanks very much. I think the questions I have are, I'll go through them, and then they're a little bit on each presentation, and I don't think it's really necessary to break them up. But I wanted to start first and foremost, what I think is really important is to thank the presenters and Black Hub for putting this together. Thank them for the initiative and the diligence in this file, because I can say personally, I absolutely support the idea of an alternative response to mental health along the lines of what we've seen in Eugene, Oregon with the CAHOOTS program. I think if it can be done safe for public safety, I absolutely support it. And I believe the board does, and I believe the service does. So I think we actually are headed in the same direction, and I think that's a positive thing. So some, I think, points that I would raise is there's a comment about the OPS has earmarked 1.5 million for mental health response funding and 2.3 for ongoing mental health, for a total of 3.809 or 3.809 700,000. And I guess one of my questions is, and I think it was answered, is that they see 100% of that going towards this initiative that they have put forward. The kind of things that, so there's some considerations the board obviously has to look at, and we are looking at in terms of funding. The first thing I would mention is that CAHOOTS comes up constantly. And so I contacted and have done some research on CAHOOTS. And I think it's worth noting that after 30 years, according to Berkeley Carnine of the Whiteberg community, they indicate that there's been a 20%, they indicate a 20% diversion rate. Chris Skinner, who's the chief of the Eugene Police Department, and it should be noted, a big supporter of the CAHOOTS plan and one who wants to see the funding increase. Chris indicates a diversion rate of between 5 and 8%. So that leaves us with between 80 to 95% of the calls still going to police. So from a board perspective, when we're looking at funding, one of the issues we have to look at is it doesn't seem at all doable to suggest we're going to eliminate 100% of our mental response health funding and still have 80 to 95% of the calls coming through. The other thing is that any savings, what's suggested there, the savings would imply that we would no longer have those officers working for us. And that simply isn't the case. We have employment agreements and collective agreements, so that we aren't suddenly going to see those officers not being there. Those changes, and something I'm sure the chief will speak to, any changes like that would happen through agreements and through attrition and through other changes, but they certainly wouldn't happen within a one-year period. So I guess that leaves me with two things. One is that there are, as is pointed out earlier, a collection of organizations that do some of the things that have been pointed. And I wondered if Black Hub had looked at cooperating with them. And I wondered if there's more of a possibility to work towards a transition towards this upstream approach, which I think everybody agrees is very necessary. So that, I think, would be my questions or comments.
Okay, who would like to answer that?
I can respond.
Yeah, Inez, go ahead.
I can speak to this. So we actually did work with people from Small Bird Clinic. We spoke to people that work at CAHOOTS, like frontline responders, as well as people that manage their program. And they seemed very confident that the partnerships that they have with Oregon are purely there for political reasons and that they don't actually depend on police in any capacity to keep communities safe. They mentioned multiple times that first responders do not need police as backup and do not need their support. And presumably, I understand that the police union is very strong and that police have contracts and those that are employed will not automatically lose their jobs. But a lot of money is spent on new hires and is also spent on keeping people employed that are suspended with pay. And so it's not true to say that there's no flexibility in reducing the amount of staff in an organization. Many different industries have unionized workers. And when that industry becomes obsolete, people progressively lose their jobs. And that is just the reality that will come with defunding the police. We're not presuming that nobody will lose their job as a police officer through this kind of initiative. That being said, the idea is that the more programs we can have that keep people safe will act as preventative measures. And beyond defunding the police for mental health services, we can move that towards different units that also merely criminalize people that have been traumatized and that lack preventative access to care. So the guns and gang unit, drug enforcement units, all those can be subject to being defunded once we have adequate preventative care for our communities.
Okay, thank you, Inez. Anything further, Member Smallwood?
No, I think we acknowledge that there's a challenge to get from where we are today to where we want to be. And I think we're all prepared to work towards that. So I do once again, thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Chief Slowly.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll be brief. I echo the comments of Chair Smallwood and board members and command officers who've spoken on this topic for as long as I've been here. I'm not aware of any police chief in Canada or any major city chief in North America who does not agree with the principle that much of what the police have been asked to do over the last 40, 50 years when it comes to mental health and addictions was inappropriately placed on our shoulders and hasn't been adequately removed. And until we can get such plans in place and get partners to work with us, unfortunately, we'll have to carry on. We'll continue to do the very best that we can in those circumstances where, quite frankly, there are other agencies, not-for-profit services, and civil actors that can and should do more to provide better and more holistic and preventative intervention type of opportunities than what the police service in the nation's capital and virtually every other police service around the country has. I echo Vice Chair Smallwood's comments. Like I have spoken to executives within the Whitebird Clinic directly, spoken with service providers within the Cahoots program, and spoken with the Chief of Police in Eugene, Oregon, as well as in Denver, Colorado, where they have adopted a very similar Cahoots-based model. In all those cases, there is still a meaningful role for police to play in support of non-police intervention calls. There is a meaningful role to play for police operations communication centers to support the dispatch of those calls. And there is a meaningful reduction in services that the police have to provide that can be redistributed to the service providers. However, I've yet to see a number higher than, in the case of Whitebird directly, 15 to 20%, and in the case of the chiefs of police in Denver and Eugene, Oregon, respectively, in the range of 5 to 8%. All that said, the principles outlined in the presentations associated to this report were well done, well developed, and well presented, and are worthy of much deep consideration for the city as it moves ahead with crafting an overall response and strategy for mental health in the city. What I didn't hear in the presentation, I'm sure it might be there in the actual full report, is beyond wellness checks, beyond crisis response, what would be the role of the city, what would be the role of civil actors in the city, and what would be the role, if any, of the police in upstream prevention, truly creating a healthy community, a healthy environment, healthy individuals that would reduce the need for wellness checks, that would reduce the need for crisis response from any service provider, the police or anybody else. And I hope that when we do develop a comprehensive mental health strategy, we will look further upstream than wellness checks and crisis response models. I would like to share with the board, though, because there has been repeatedly statements made today and in many other delegations over the last several months, that the police should be removed from all aspects of mental health service delivery and particularly crisis response. I'm going to read a very quick list of 10 events that were all called in by the community, either by a neighbor, a family member, a social service provider, a hospital. All of them called into the police in the last month since we had the last board meeting. Number one, A male stating he is really upset that his son was taken away. He has a firearm and will use it on himself. Officers are on scene to assess the response. Number 2, naked male in a hallway of a building trying to break into apartments. Male obviously high on drugs and has numerous facial injuries. Number 3, OPS received a call for a person hanging from a balcony at 475 Elgin Street. Officers literally ran from the building I'm sitting in across the street to 475. Observed the female hanging down from her apartment to the apartment below. Several members rushed to apartment 407 and held the female while other officers attended apartment 507 to cut the rope that was around her. Number 4, neighbor called police after hearing a disturbance. Officers attended and located an elderly female covered in blood. Female had obvious signs of being assaulted by an unknown weapon. Officers requested paramedics and the female was taken away to the Civic Hospital Trauma Unit for the injuries, including trauma to head and limbs. It turns out it was a younger resident of her family who attacked her with a weapon who was suffering from a mental health crisis. Number 5, officers attended a mental health call in which the subject answered the door with a knife to her throat. Number 6, female left residence on her bike with a note outlining her plan to commit suicide. She left her phone behind and indicated the method of suicide, which would be using a syringe to inject air into her body. Subject known to enjoy the water. Our officers responded, located the female, and were able to apprehend her under Section 17 of the Mental Health Act, and she was transported to the hospital by the patrol officers. Number 7, 30-year-old suicidal female parked her car near the Huntmar overpass at the 417 highway. She was observed by many witnesses hanging over the outside of the rails over the highway. Traffic was stopped by our officers on both roadways. Efforts to negotiate were in place. Through a combination of efforts of our officers, our tactical unit, our school resource officers, and the fire department, we were able to negotiate a safe outcome for this female. Number 8, a 1-year-old baby in a stroller was punched by an autistic youth male who grabbed the stroller and startled the mother. The baby was checked by paramedics and appeared physically well. The autistic youth was returned to a caseworker, and mental health professionals were following up on the incident. Number 9, an elderly male with mental health issues, delusional, grabbed a knife. A person was cut on the wrist. Officers located the male nearby. He fled with a pair of scissors in his hands. He was later apprehended, no injuries, and turned over to medical practitioners. And number 10, male with mental health issues and a machete was having a dispute with his roommates. Subject male is off of his medication and in a possible state of psychosis. Police were called to assist. The subject male threatened to shoot officers and beat them with a baton if they entered his bedroom door. Our negotiations were successful, and we were able to safely resolve the incident without any injuries. I could go on, Chair. I genuinely want for our police service to have a much more diminished role in any mental health calls, particularly crisis calls. The reality is, though, this is the reality, and there will always be a role for police at any form of the prevention, intervention, and crisis response. We simply have to work better together to get to that level, and we certainly have some good ideas today from the different delegations. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Member Johnson?
Okay. Yes, and thank you, Chief, for sharing those stories. They're sound like very difficult, upsetting scenes, and it must be very challenging for the officers and for the mental health and wellness to be dealing with those situations. I mean, certainly just even listening to it today, it's distressing. So that role is very important. I think there's an opportunity, though, with the pandemic, because so many of us have become so aware of the inequities in our society and how important it is to move forward in a different way. So, the city, the police force, the police board really needs to look at how we can handle this better. And I hear the will. We just have to turn that into action and just, look to how we can do things better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Member Smallwood.
Thank you. One of the things that I was thinking of through the presentations and through the chief's comments, certainly in my mind, and what all the research I've done shows, there are absolutely calls when there will be police needed. The issue generally becomes ones when the police aren't needed, and that I think is one of the tough things about this discussion is, and I know that the presenters mentioned it about the 911 response. And at some point, I think the board would appreciate hearing from the chief about how and I think Edmonton is one of the communities that has developed a different line, a 211 line, I think, where there can be a central point for a mental health crisis where they're not police centric, and the decision can be made whether or not by somebody independent of the police, whether the police need to be called, so that it isn't sort of, because I could see a situation where somebody on a call center saying, I better err on the side of caution and involve the police. And so the police may be involved in more calls than is necessary. So I think that's an entry point, and it would be interesting to see if that might be a starting point for us in terms of looking at a diversion. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Smallwood. We have a long agenda. I do want to wrap this up, but just slowly.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just two quick responses. Member Johnson, thank you. We're not just thinking, we are acting. The board has received a number of updates from Deputy Chief Bell and others on the progress to date of the consultation. With the timely intervention of Chair Deans, we've seen the city take a much more supportive and leadership role, which is exactly what we intend. We don't intend to lead the development of this, we intend to support the development of it. Member Smallwood, you may recall last July, I believe, I did a full presentation at the board in my verbal in which I actually outlined a 211, 311, 511 system where we would actually have a dispatcher triaging calls similar to the Toronto Police model, similar to the Edmonton Police model. What we determined to do, though, on the direction of the board, was not to implement these changes ad hoc and separate from the community, that we would hold off on those changes, allocate 2021 budget to the consultation process with the community, and when the community determines what is the best way to receive these calls, triage these calls, dispatch these calls, whether to us or other service providers, that it would be the community that would determine that methodology, and we would not do it arbitrarily. The money in the 2021 budget was to allow for that consultation, that experimentation, and ultimately the change in the operating model. We remain action-oriented and committed to a shared vision where the police have less and less of a role in all aspects of mental health, but will always have some level of a role in all aspects of mental health. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Robin, Samia, Nora, and Inez. I know, I think Nora, you have a hand up,
Sorry.
but we don't allow a dialogue in this way, only when there's a question answered. So thank you very much for your presentation today. We appreciated hearing from you and your thoughtful comments. And we're going to move on now to Erwin Waller.
Hello, my name is Erwin Waller. I'm here because Ottawa can be doing a lot more to reduce gun and gender-based violence. This is going to require some clear but affordable changes in policy. And if these changes occurred, we could expect a 50% reduction in violence by 2025. This is going to require support from police leadership and partnerships. I'm an emeritus professor of criminology at the University of Ottawa and author of several books about reducing violence. I help cities and governments in Canada and across the world to innovate and learn from each other. In the face of 4 homicides in 1 week, Chief Slowly was reported as calling for comprehensive approaches, and he's repeated that today. Some of those will tackle poverty and racism, housing, and so on, and even mental health. But these are while necessary, relatively expensive and long-term, and unfortunately not enough to reduce violence by 50% within the next 3 years. So what would be enough? Ottawa needs also to invest now in those programs that are proven to prevent violence. These programs focus on helping young men, families, and neighborhoods most involved in the violence. These must be part of a comprehensive approach with policing as a partner. The top of my list to reduce gun violence are street outreach workers, social workers who can gain trust, not police staff. They outreach to and mentor the young men in the community, and also at critical moments in hospital emergency rooms when these young men have been victims of violence. There are others on my list of proven programs to reduce gender violence, programs in schools and universities, and ways to change toxic masculinity. It's not enough to know the proven programs from websites such as the World Health Organization or the British College of Policing. We also need to know the internationally established essentials for successfully tailoring them to this city. We need to implement them with a plan that sets performance standards and measurable goals. So what is feasible and popular in Ottawa at this juncture? Ottawa needs to learn from successful strategies in other cities internationally, such as Glasgow in Scotland that achieved a 50% reduction in homicides within 3 years. By the way, it was generated by police leadership. The Glasgow public health model has recently been adopted by many regions in England, and importantly by the Mayor of London, who was recently re-elected. These cities, unlike US cities, have comparable social welfare policies to us, and so homicide rates lower or in a similar range to Ottawa. They are very, very different from US cities, all of whom have much higher homicide rates and extraordinarily racialized concentrations of poverty and incarceration. The top of my list for essentials is an epidemiological diagnosis leading to action by sectors capable of tackling causes, including policing and parents that support use of those services. It must lead to objectives and performance indicators. It must include adequate and sustained funding, which in my view is the equivalent of 10% of the policing budget. I've developed with a colleague safety monitor tools both on the proven programs and on these essentials. Hey, Ottawa, it's time to step up to the plate to save lives and stop intimate partner and sexual violence before they happen. Just as the city has a plan on sustainable development goals relating to climate, we need a clear, evidence-based, and adequately funded plan to implement upstream violence that works. Let's be a leader in community safety, use evidence, apply robust planning to tailor and sustain it, and ensure a legacy of our city free from violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waller, for your presentation. Are there any questions or comments for the delegation? Seeing none, we do appreciate your wise words today. Thank you, and we'll move on to Samantha McLeese.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Samantha. You have 5 minutes.
Great. I want to first re-ask a question about social media and get clarification around policy for OPS accounts blocking residents. And I'll remind you of the lawsuit brought forward to Mayor Watson a few years back. Next, in response to the scenarios presented by Chief Foley, what you did was demonstrate the devastating outcomes of the complete lack of community services and supports. We know that people call the police because there are no other options, but I've spent enough time talking to people after a crisis and after their interactions with cops to know that we cannot keep doing things this way. So thank you for joining us in our calls for less funding for reactive policing and more funding for preventative resources. Next, in response to an agenda item from the last meeting, I replied to an inquiry regarding the use of judicial referral hearings. This almost slipped under the radar, but thanks to Michael Spratt and Cassandra Richards, 2 local lawyers, it was brought to public attention. The federal government introduced judicial referral hearings under Bill C-75 to give discretionary powers to police and Crown attorneys in response to administration of justice offenses. The purpose is to keep people out of jail to alleviate the overly punitive nature of bail conditions and to reduce the burden on the courts. But once again, we see that giving police more discretion does not work. This provision has only been used 4 times in 2 years in Ottawa. These hearings are meant to stop people from remaining caught in a cycle of criminalization and incarceration. But officers choose not to make use of them, despite what we hear around this table every month about things being done differently. Another example of good talk, no action. To quote Spratt and Richards, it turns out giving prosecutors and police greater discretionary powers is a bad way to fix a broken legal system. Knowing that OPS is not engaging with this provision, we must strengthen the calls for decriminalization, and this is something that board members can do. I urge you to read a recent op-ed in The Citizen from Layla Attar, in which she explains how municipal leaders can support the calls to decriminalize possession of substances and emphasize a public health approach in response. The other issue I raised today is one that I've raised before about housing and homelessness. The crime-free multi-housing program facilitated by OPS encourages landlords across the city to conduct record checks. This means that people with criminal records who have served their sentence and are in the community trying to rebuild their lives after the trauma of criminalization and incarceration cannot find a place to live. Even if they have a job or access to subsidies that will allow them to afford an apartment, this program, which was given an award by Crime Prevention Ottawa, actively prevents people from securing housing. Without housing, people remain at risk of further criminalization. This exclusion, facilitated by landlords with the support of OPS, is amplified for Black, Indigenous, and racialized residents of Ottawa, who already experience heightened discrimination in the rental housing market and who are also at an increased risk for being criminalized. I'll share a quick quote from my own qualitative research on the collateral consequences of punishment in Ottawa regarding crime-free multi-housing programs and its impact. Police are not stupid, you know. They know that this actually leads to less safe communities. You know what I mean? They know that pushing people with records into isolation creates a less safe community. I'd like the board to look into this program and evaluate whether the crime-free multi-housing program actually contributes to community safety and well-being, and to look at what cities across the US are doing to eliminate discrimination from the rental housing market, especially for folks with police and criminal records. Leading from this, I attended a public discussion about NRTs during your Police Week celebrations. And when asked about the police response to encampments in Ottawa, one OPS member said something along the lines of, well, we try to refer people to services, but we are at the mercy of long wait times in the social service sector. This response was infuriating, given that these wait times are caused by a massive lack of funding and resources. So given what we've already heard, I really hope that we see either a freeze or preferably a reduction in the OPS budget. Social services in Ottawa are in desperate need of that increase. So please use your voice, your position, and your power so that the community is no longer at the mercy of a bloated police budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief Slowly, are you able to respond to the question around social media?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I've just got a note here from John Steinbach so he can speak to that. So John, if Krista can transfer John over to the panelist side.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I heard the concern from the delegate. So we do have a policy on all of our social accounts where we can, and it's listed on our social media accounts, that govern how we look at dialogue online around different types of language, behavior, etc.
John, you're cutting out a bit.
Oh, hopefully now you can hear me. We do have a policy that covers how we can, how that governs how we have dialogue on our social media accounts. In the account in particular, I reached out to the people who run that account to find out if anyone has been recently blocked in their account. I can report back to you in the next coming days. I can tell you it's become a longer discussion out there. We regularly have to, I don't know the exact circumstances that of the blocking that's in discussion here, but it is sort of a regular practice on most social accounts now that we have to constantly watch for language. I mean, the CBC just recently blocked all Facebook comments on their accounts. So, but I will report back. I don't know if, Chair, if you want me to report back through you. I know there's a request in, and to find out the exact circumstances we're speaking to. but our policy is clearly listed on our social accounts as well, and I can email that out to anyone who wishes it.
Okay, well, just trying to understand how it can be made public. So maybe it could be.
Happy to bring it back as an inquiry if you'd like.
Maybe you can bring it back as an inquiry at the next board meeting.
Sure, will do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much, Samantha, for being with us today. We're now going to move on with the inquiries. Do any members of the board have an inquiry?
Yes, Chair Deans, I have 3 inquiries, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Member Nerman.
Thank you, Chair Deans. Chief, I will request OPS to provide the replies to the following inquiries in writing and in the due course. First, I understand that the OPS Guns and Gang Unit has experienced significant structural changes in the last year. In light of the recent shootings, I would like to understand how these changes might be linked to the overall performance and solvency of the Guns and Gang Unit and the number of shooting incidents we are experiencing here in Ottawa. Second, how has the budget of the Guns and Gang Unit changed over the last 5 years, both in terms of operational budget and staffing budget? B, I understand that a number of the positions in the Guns and Gang Unit are provincially funded. How many positions, and are these positions fully staffed with the unit? C, how many cases does the Guns and Gang Unit handle annually for the past 3 years? Number 3, how the OPS addresses guns and violent crime is a concern for every community. Every member of the community, regardless of their culture and background, wants to feel safe and secure in their homes and neighborhoods. At times, unfortunately, it is the actions of the police that are cited as the reasons that some citizens actually feel less safe. How is the OPS addressing this barrier that seems to be growing with many communities? And finally, fourth, how has the Community Equity Council been engaged to review the work of the Guns and Gang Unit, and specifically how enforcement activities that impact communities are directed? More importantly, how has the CEC and the larger community in Ottawa been engaged to help inform the enforcement practices of the Guns and Gang Unit and the OPS more generally? My second inquiry, Chief, I am following up to my inquiry from July 2020, and OPS replied to that inquiry in September of 2020, and presentation to the board by the OPS in May 2021 board meeting on use of force and de-escalation model. So first, how important is the role played by the language skills in negotiations to de-escalate a situation? Second, the OPS responded in their response, and I quote, if an incident is emergent, an officer can request an ad hoc translator to attend, which would be an on-duty officer who speaks the required language, end quote. Third, in my opinion, this ad hoc policy may or may not work, and to adopt a permanent and more consistent policy going forward, does the OPS adopts by the book the Ontario model, or the best practices allow OPS to make discretion to employ and use its strategies, including employing language barriers techniques to its use of force and de-escalation model in the city of Ottawa? And my final and the third inquiry, Chief, is concerning the violence against women. During the May board meeting, the OPS gave a brief presentation in this regard. I have some follow-up questions. First, can OPS provide me with the statistics of how many women from South Asian descent not speaking English or French called for the assistance between the years of 2019 and 2021? And was adequate and timely assistance provided to all of such victims? Thank you, Chair. Those were my inquiries.
Okay, thank you, Member Nerman. And I would just ask that you provide the inquiries in writing, because that was a lot to take in, and in fairness to the service, and I know they put a lot of work into responding to inquiries.
I will definitely email it to Krista, which can be forwarded to them.
Thank you very much. Member Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Deans. And this is an inquiry that was actually mentioned earlier in the conversation today. So could the OPS please share the results of their completed review of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee soon, because I think this is an issue on all our minds, either at a future board meeting or at the board's Policy and Governance Committee, so that we can identify the calls of action that apply to the board and to the Ottawa Police Service, and develop our action plan, the action plan to implement these findings.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Are there any other inquiries? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Starting with item number 1, the Chair's verbal report. I do have a brief verbal report, so we'll hold that item and return to it. Item number 2, the Chief's verbal report. Again, the Chief has a report, so we'll be holding that item and returning to it. Item number 3, procurement related to the 2022 Ottawa Police Service Budget, Use of Force Review, and Board Strategic Planning. Does anyone want to hold this item to discuss? Can we carry that item? Carry it?
Carry.
Thank you. Item number 4, proposed regulations under the Community Safety and Policing Act. The board will recall that at the last meeting, we reviewed and approved feedback to be provided to the ministry on some draft regulations they released, which will form part of the Community Safety and Policing Act. The feedback was drafted in consultation with OPS staff. The ministry has since released additional regulations for input, and it's anticipated the ministry will continue this periodic release of regulations. The challenge is the ministry's timelines for feedback do not always align with our regular meeting schedule. Therefore, I am requesting delegated authority to work with board staff and staff at the OPS to continue to review the draft regulations and provide feedback. I'm happy to ensure reports continue to be brought to the forward to the board to detail the feedback provided to the ministry. However, the reports will be for information only, not approval, in order to meet the deadlines for the feedback. If we want to discuss this, I'm going to hold it and return to it because we're in the consent agenda. But if basically you're fine with giving me that delegated authority, we will carry it now. Is there anyone that wants to hold it? Member Johnson,
yes,
you want to hold it? Okay, we'll return to it. Item number 5, candidate day briefing. There is a presentation. We will return to it. Item number 6, 2021 to 2023 strategic direction for the Ottawa Police Service semi-annual report. Are there any questions on this item?
I had a question on that item.
Okay, so we'll hold it and return to it. Item number 7, Professional Standards Unit 2020 annual report.
I had a question on that one as well.
Okay, that item will be held. Item number 8, report on the SIU investigation. Any questions or comments received on the report?
Received.
Received.
Item number 9, response to inquiry 1-21-08, May 2020, racist meme outcomes in light of recent TikTok video.
Chair, I have a question if this item can be held on.
Okay, this item will be held. Item number 10, outstanding board inquiries and motions, June 2020. Any questions? Is the item received?
Received.
Received.
Thank you. Item number 11, letters of commendation. This is the Chief's report. Are there any questions or comments received?
Received.
Okay. So we'll now return to the first item, which is my verbal report. I wanted to begin today by taking a moment to remember Rabbi Reuben Bolka, who passed away this weekend. Rabbi Bolka was an important community and spiritual leader who has positively touched many lives in Ottawa and beyond. And on behalf of this board, I wanted to offer our condolences to his family and friends. I also would like to address the alleged corruption charges that were brought forward last week against 2 OPS officers. As this is the subject of an ongoing investigation by the RCMP, the board has not issued a statement. I would, however, like to take this opportunity as chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board to emphasize that it is unacceptable for any police service member to engage in criminal behavior or corrupt practices. We rely on the trust and confidence from the public for effective policing in Ottawa. Charges such as those laid last week can serve to damage that trust. As a board, we will continue to support and work with the chief to ensure that the Ottawa Police Services remains an ethical, professional, inclusive, and lawful police service. I would now like to share an update about the development of the mental health response strategy. As I reported last month, Ottawa City Council asked the city manager to take the lead in consulting with relevant stakeholders to develop a recommended path forward to coordinate the city's efforts regarding the development of a mental health response strategy with those currently being undertaken by the Ottawa Police Service. I am pleased to share that the development of the mental health response strategy will be transitioning to a city-led initiative. We've been hearing loud and clear that many community members do not want the development of this strategy to be led by police. I firmly believe that the city, under the umbrella of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, is best positioned to lead the coordination of this strategy. Their strong connections with stakeholders across Ottawa will help to ensure a diversity of voices and ideas are heard and considered. Further details about the transition will be shared over the coming months. One implication for the board is that there will be a shift in the reporting structure with respect to this strategy development, as responsibility will sit with the city. Despite the shift in reporting, the service will continue to provide the Ottawa Police Services Board with updates about the initiative. I'd also like to take a moment to talk about the board's work plan, as we have been busy recruiting 2 firms to support our work plan over the last several months. At last month's board meeting, I brought forward a report about hiring PACE, Public Affairs and Community Engagement, a firm that will be working with the board to support us in developing new processes for engaging with the community. Over the summer months, they will be carrying out several semi-structured interviews and small group discussions with racialized community members to identify opportunities and processes to strengthen community members' participation and voice in future planning processes. We recognize that our current processes for consultation, and in particular our monthly board meetings, do not meet the community's increasing desire to engage with and be heard by this board. We hope that the outcome from this work is ultimately a more deliberate process for engagement beyond monthly board meetings, one that centers around dialogue and the co-creation of solutions to issues facing the community. The board's intention is to incorporate recommendations from this work into future community engagement processes, including those related to the 2022 budget. I also brought forward a report today recommending the hiring of Strategy Corp, a public affairs communication and management consulting advisory firm, to support the board with 3 separate but related work packages. The first is a use of force policy review, which will be conducted to identify gaps and areas for improvement to strengthen existing policies to better reflect current best practices. The second is the development of a recommended strategic planning process and accompanying strategic direction paper that will set the board up to develop a new strategic plan in 2022. The new plan will be firmly situated within the broader context of community safety and well-being and will respond to the shifting narrative around policing. And the third is support to further refine the board's ongoing work to reduce or freeze the 2022 budget at 2021 levels. Strategy Corp will provide analytical support to the board to identify opportunities for cost containment in the 2022 budget. In November 2020, the board committed to making a concerted effort to reduce or freeze the budget at 2021 levels. The budget direction that was released last week came from the City of Ottawa and did not include input from the Ottawa Police Services Board. A 3% budget increase is not set in stone, and the board remains committed to reducing costs while continuing to provide effective policing in the City of Ottawa. One final update I would like to share relates to the CAO recruitment process. The board's recruitment for a new Chief Administrative Officer was officially launched on May 13th. The board has received numerous applications through Rogers Bernstein, the search firm we retained to assist us with our search. The board will be conducting interviews in July, and this concludes my verbal update. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none received. Thank you. The next item is the Chief's verbal report, and Chief, I will turn that over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Merci beaucoup. I will join you in recognizing the sad passing of Rabbi Bulka. Like you, I wish to extend condolences to the family, friends, and congregation of Rabbi Bulka. We are all saddened by his passing. He was an interfaith leader, a bridge builder, a diversity champion, and a beloved family member. A person who sought to make the city, the society, and the world a better place. Rabbi Bulka was always available to the Ottawa Police Service and to me myself for wise counsel and practical support. He had a special gift to be able to focus on and find the commonality in all humanity. He will be missed. Chair Dean's board, this morning, the Ottawa Aboriginal Coalition, the OAC, held a sunrise ceremony at City Hall to honor the children found at residential schools in British Columbia and Saskatchewan. I attended the sunrise event along with my full command team, Steve Bell, Joan McKenna, Jamie Dunlop, and many of our frontline officers and civilian members. We were joined by several hundred people from across the city. The sacred fire ceremony, the smudge ceremony, and all the other ceremonies provided me and all the attendees with a place to share our grief, regenerate hope, and recommit to a better future. On behalf of the Ottawa Police Service, last week I formally extended our condolences and our support to the Ottawa Aboriginal Coalition, as well as to all Indigenous peoples across Canada. All of us share in the grief over this discovery, this latest discovery, and our hearts go out to the families whose children were taken and who were left without answers for generations. This latest discovery further reveals a terrible historical treatment of Indigenous people in Canada and exposes the role that many of Canada's institutions played in this still unfolding tragedy. It is a reality that no Canadian should turn away from. While we mourn the loss of these children, our service is committed to playing our role in helping to improve the lives of all Indigenous people here in the city and across Canada. That is why we've been working with the OAC and our Indigenous community partners on the following initiatives, some of which were laid out in the 2020 budget. First of all, implementing an Indigenous Women's Safety Advisor position within our specialized investigations section. This new position will help to ensure the full implementation of the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry. Second, developing a new anti-Indigenous racism training program, as well as a cultural awareness strategy to improve our members' understanding of the historical and current Indigenous experience in Canada, so that they can in turn provide improved services to the community and form better partnerships with the Indigenous community. This important work is also supported by the Community Equity Council. Number three, implementing the Ottawa Police Service's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Action Plan to provide all OPS members with skills-based training in implicit bias, diversity and inclusion, intercultural competency, conflict resolution, human rights, anti-racism, equity, and social justice training. In addition to the anti-Indigenous racism training, the OPS will also be developing and delivering anti-Black, anti-Muslim, and anti-Asian racism modules. Chair, as we celebrate the life of Rabbi Bulka and we also talk about the ongoing challenges of systemic racism in Canada, we continue to see a rise in hate-related incidents and hate crimes in Ottawa. The targets of hate are as varied as the nature of the incidents themselves. We are increasing our efforts to encourage the reporting of any form of hate crime or hate incident happening in our communities. Becoming an anti-racist service, an anti-racist city, and indeed an anti-racist society will not happen simply with anti-racism training programs or cultural awareness strategies. We know there is no simple or quick fix for these generational human failings. It requires a lifelong individual commitment to inclusion and a coordinated effort of leadership from across all of civil society. Chair, there have been a number of questions related to our enterprise level projects. One of the reports on the agenda this evening is a strategic planning report that outlines the Ottawa Police Service's enterprise level priority projects that resulted from our 2020 budget approval. These critically important strategic investments are designed to improve our organization, our culture, and our service to all people in Ottawa. They're intended to better enable all OPS members to demonstrate improved duty of care, public trust, and to work towards community safety and well-being in an integrated service delivery model. We are not doing this alone. In each of these enterprise-level projects, we are working in partnership with community stakeholders. This ensures that we receive meaningful community input into the design, implementation, and evaluation phases of each of the projects. I turn my attention now, Chair, to violence against women. One of the key projects that we have at the enterprise level is focused on reducing violence against women in Ottawa. It's an area that we know needs more investment, both in terms of partnerships in the community and in terms of investigators and staff members. This month, tragically, Ms. Hanadi Mohammed was stabbed and murdered. Her daughter was seriously wounded. With the direct assistance of the public, our officers were able to quickly locate and arrest the suspect, Ms. Mohammed's former spouse. Our homicide unit has laid criminal charges and the case is before the courts. That said, last week we convened a special meeting with our VAW strategy partners from the community, designed to improve our capacity as a service and as a city to better prevent and respond to such tragedies. The VAW community groups presented us with a list of asks to improve our VAW-related services. We've committed to implementing every one of the items as soon as possible. We've also discussed additional areas of improvement and investment well beyond what the initial community list identified. Preventing violence against women is a priority for our service. Our partner assault unit investigated almost 2,100 cases in the year 2020 and has already investigated at least 1,100 this year. The partner assault unit members are committed to the safety of persons in the city who are at risk to domestic-related violence. As a service, we are listening to and working closely with the VAW community to make continuous improvements in all aspects of our service delivery. This has also been a very active month in terms of police operations. I'll start with protests in the nation's capital. Our members have been successfully and safely managing a number of protests in the city over the course of the year. The Ottawa Police Service will continue to work with our National Capital Region partners to help ensure that people can fully exercise their democratic rights to lawful protest and free speech while still managing the need to ensure public safety. The PowerPoint image that you're looking at right now, where there's that yellow circle around one of our Ottawa police officers, that's a member of our police liaison team. In fact, I believe that is Sergeant Louis Carvalho. Year to date, almost 7 months into 2021, because of the work of our police liaison team members, our overall frontline services, the work of Inspector Moran, who you'll hear from later on in regards to the Canada Day celebrations, we have gone through the entire year of literally daily protests with no use of force incidents and no arrests. On to traffic. Our traffic unit continues to focus on traffic safety with our Project Noisemaker efforts. Project Noisemaker has resulted in more than 1,100 charges since May 1st relating to stunt driving, speeding, noise, and distracted driving. Speeding has accounted for 40% of the charges. The project is focused on addressing community complaints, reducing the number of collisions, injuries, and deaths on our city streets. Next to a very disturbing trend. In the past 2 months, the Ottawa Police Service has responded to the abduction of 3 children. I can tell you, in 3 decades of policing for me, I've never seen 3 child abductions. 2 of these were considered stranger abductions. You'll all recall on June 3rd, we launched a massive search operation after a young infant who was visiting Ottawa with their mother from Nunavut was abducted. At approximately 8:30 a.m., an ESU officer was abducted. Sorry, Chair, just received a note. I just need to read this for a second. Thank you. I'll provide information to the board on the note shortly. On June 3rd, we launched a massive search operation after a young infant who was visiting Ottawa with their mother from Nunavut was abducted. At approximately 8:30 a.m., an ESU officer who was part of the search team located a potential witness that the police were seeking in the area. Further investigation by these frontline officers led them to an apartment in the 800 block of Pinecrest Road. When officers arrived at the unit, they heard a baby crying inside. The officers entered the apartment and located the missing girl. The worst fears of the family of this missing girl, of the city of Ottawa, many residents across this province and across this country, and the fears of the officers conducting the search were alleviated by the safe recovery of this young child, baby Abby. That same night, we issued an Amber Alert through the support of the Ontario Provincial Police. With any Amber Alert issued overnight, we often get complaints from the public of their sleep being disturbed. However, we wanted to share with you one comment that stood out. This is again in the comments, I believe, that were part of item number 11 on the board's agenda. Here's a quote. As I'm sure many others were, I was jolted awake at approximately 3 in the morning. I was a little confused until I realized it was an Amber Alert. I went back to sleep thinking to myself how lucky I was to live in a country where child safety is a much higher priority than a good night's sleep. Thank you for always being there. I'll update the board now on a manslaughter charge that was laid by our homicide unit. In May of 2020, our homicide unit began investigating the death of Chloe Guan Branch, a 5-year-old child. Following a year of intense investigation, which included significant forensic analysis, the homicide unit charged a man with manslaughter and a woman with criminal negligence causing death and failing to provide the necessities of life. I'll move on now to the life-saving efforts of our frontline officers in delivering Narcan to people suffering from overdoses. Over the past month, Chair, Ottawa Police Service officers deployed Narcan 8 times after responding to calls for service for overdoses. Our officers are making their contribution to the greater efforts of many persons and many agencies in Ottawa, all of whom are proactively responding and trying to intervene in overdose cases to help save lives. I'm proud of the efforts of our Ottawa Police Service members in this important public safety, community safety, and well-being effort. It is a summer season, Chair, and sadly our Marine unit has once again been tasked with searching the Ottawa River and other waterways for victims of drownings. We had an occasion in the past month where a young man entered the water near Lemieux Island and didn't resurface. Our divers worked constantly through very cold and treacherous waters to recover his body. We continue to call on all people in Ottawa to practice water safety and boat safety. There's been some healthy discussion about the budget in this meeting and previous meetings. On the administrative side, we've begun the development of the 2022 budget build 6 months earlier this year than any other previous year. I want to thank the efforts of Deputy Chief Bell and his team within the financial area of our organization. Deputy Bell has been leading the initial discussions with city councillors, community stakeholders, and he's been often joined on these consultations by board members Smallwood and Johnson. We're also drafting a set of budget options for the report in the July board meeting, the July FAC meeting and the July board meeting. This will be followed by the board's full public consultation on these 3 options. This will be an important discussion for the service and for the city, and we're focused on ensuring everyone is able to be heard and that the processes for developing the budget are as transparent as they can be. I will advise the chair and the board, and this is just the information I received. It is with great sadness that I inform you of the passing of Constable Dennis Dupont, a long-standing member of our fraud unit. There are no further details that I can share with you at this moment. We will share the details on funeral services as they become available. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Dennis's family and his friends during this very difficult time. Lots of sadness to share in the passing of Dennis and Rabbi Bulka. I do want to celebrate some news with the board and with the public who are watching. I want to recognize the career of Sergeant Mohammed Elmi, otherwise known as Mo Elmi. Mohammed will be leaving our service after 17 years. He started as a civilian member of our organization, applied to be a serving officer, and rose to the rank of sergeant within the organization. More importantly, he rose to be a true leader in this organization, a true leader in the community. He will be appointed as a Justice of the Peace by the province of Ontario and assigned to serve his duties as a Justice of the Peace right here in the city of Ottawa. It is a well-deserved appointment to a great police officer, a great public servant, and a great person. Mo is dedicated to his work, his family, and the community here in Canada and abroad. He has always been an important link between our service and the Somali community. He and his wife, Amun Omer, were born in Somalia and arrived in Canada as refugees. They know firsthand the power of education, community, and hope. They are determined to share the transformative opportunity of education with youth in Somalia and around the world. In 2008, they launched the Somali Hope Academy community in rural Somalia, providing education to 700 students every year. Congratulations, Mohammed. You have always made a difference in your career and your life, and we know that you'll continue to do so in the years ahead. Chair, I'll conclude my comments on a difficult subject that you touched on in yours. I will end my verbal by discussing the news that broke from our service last week that 2 Ottawa police constables were criminally charged by the RCMP. We asked the RCMP to investigate this matter after information came from the community about concerning activities of one of our officers. The 2 officers were ultimately charged by the RCMP criminal corruption investigation, and they have been suspended. They will be provided due process as any member of the public would and as any member of the Ottawa Police Service would. They will also get full supports and health supports while they're working for us. I'm not going to comment further on this case because it is ongoing with criminal matters before the courts. It is important we talk about the good work we do, but it's also important that we recognize the misconduct that occurs within our ranks. I'm never going to be one to say all police officers are good and right all the time. Police officers are people, and like people, they're vulnerable to poor behavior, bad choices, misconduct, in this case, criminal corrupt conduct. It is our job as an organization to recruit, train, support, supervise, and deploy the most professional, ethical, and equitable service members. We must also make it a safe environment for people, whether they're Ottawa Police Service members or community members, to come forward and raise concerns about the conduct of any of our members. When they raise concerns about the conduct of an Ottawa Police Service member, we will act. During my tenure, we've improved all of our risk management processes, as well as our capacity to prevent, intervene, and investigate into conduct issues. When we're dealing with sensitive, complex, and/or high-risk cases, we have gone so far as to bring in outside agencies to assist us. We've brought in third-party independent investigators such as Ruben Tomlinson and the RCMP Anti-Corruption Unit. We will continue to take these actions when necessary. We are focused on improving the culture of this organization. It will take time and it will take work, but be confident that we are focused and we will move this organization forward. Illegal or inappropriate behaviors cannot be tolerated, and we are serious and focused on identifying, investigating, and prosecuting these acts whenever they occur. That said, I can state with great confidence and great pride that the vast majority of our Ottawa Police Service members are hardworking, dedicated, professional, compassionate people. They make a difference in the lives of community members every day, and I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud of this police service. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chief Slowly, for your verbal report today. And I just want to add my congratulations to Mo Elmi on his appointment as a Justice of Peace. I can tell you, I know Mo really well because he was a longtime community police officer in my ward, in Ward 10. And he is well known to the community and well loved in the community and was a great community police officer. And I can only extrapolate that he too will be a very fair-minded member of the bench. So congratulations, Mo, if you're listening. Anyone else? Seeing none received on the chief's report. Thank you. Okay, item number 4 is the next held item, and that item was held by Member Johnson. And I was asking for delegated authority to be able to respond to regulations as they come around Community Safety and Policing Act 2019. So Member Johnson, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Deans. I just had a suggestion for a friendly amendment. And I wondered if we could add, I guess maybe a clause you'd call it, to allow board members 48 hours to review and provide feedback for consideration prior to it being sent. I think it'll help, educate us all on this process as well. And I noticed currently on the recommendations, regulatory review, I forget the exact title, is out on June 11th, and they give them until July 26th. So I think it would allow for 48 hours just to read, but still giving you the delegated authority. It's just a friendly amendment.
I mean, I will attempt to do that wherever possible to provide information to the board members and give you 48 hours to review it and provide suggestions. Whenever that is feasible or doable, I will do that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So carried on this recommendation. Do I need to read the motion? Does everyone have it on their screen? I'll read it out for the benefit of the public that don't have it. Whereas the Ministry of the Solicitor General continues to develop regulations to bring the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019 into force, and whereas the Ministry is requesting public and stakeholder input on the proposed regulations as they are drafted and released for consultation, and whereas the Ottawa Police Services Board meets on a monthly basis on predetermined dates with the exception of August where no meeting is held, making it difficult for the board to align its consideration and development of feedback on the proposed regulations with the ministry's deadline for input. And we can add there, and where feasible, we will endeavor to circulate to the board with 48 hours notice for their consideration and feedback. Therefore, be it resolved that the Ottawa Police Services Board delegate authority to the board chair to work with board staff in consultation with staff at the Ottawa Police Service to develop and provide comments and feedback to the ministry on proposed regulations under the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019 as they are released. Is that item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Item number 5, Canada Day briefing. Chief, I will turn this over to you. Oh, maybe I won't. Is Chief Slowly still with us? Yeah, there you are.
Sorry, Chair.
I was just going to turn the Canada Day presentation over to you to introduce the presenters.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, apologies to the board. I was just getting properly briefed on the matter of the death of our service member, Denny Dupont. Chair, I'm going to ask Inspector Moran to provide an overview of our operations around Canada Day 2021, as well as a sense of what folks can expect going into the weekend this year. With no further ado, I'll turn things over to Inspector Michelle Moran.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invite and the introduction there, Chief and Chair Deans. This year is going to be a little different when it comes to the Canada Day event. As it currently stands, we do not have any shows that are going to be taking place on Parliament Hill or anywhere downtown. Heritage Canada has, due to the pandemic, canceled the outdoor shows. The suburbs, such as in East Division or West and Central, there are no events being held. Therefore, it will not be a normal Canada Day. If I can change the slide to the next slide, please. So there will be no changing of the guard on Parliament Hill. Some of you may have noticed there's quite a bit of construction on Parliament Hill, so the space for changing of the guard is limited. And due to the pandemic, it's also been canceled. There is no outdoor stage performances this year on Parliament Hill. and the fireworks displays have been canceled over the downtown core. There will be some virtual performances streamed online. They will be taped prior to Canada Day. I'm aware of one show that will take place and being streamed online live. And that's where we're at with Canada Day this year in terms of our traditional Canada Day celebrations. Next slide, please. The city of Ottawa will be in phase 2 on June 30th, not July 2nd, as we well know. What we anticipate will happen is the crowds will start coming out. People have been locked up for quite a number of time due to the pandemic. Last year, we're still in a lockdown phase. This year, probably not in a lockdown phase. So we're expecting probably have some crowds congregate downtown. The purpose of our planning is to ensure the crowd safety and public safety. If there's a large crowd movements, we have to ensure that these folks can move around safely and can return home afterwards after it is what they've wanted to do downtown. We have to take an all hazards approach. So we have to make sure that there is nothing untoward that would happen within those crowds or around those crowds. Every Canada Day that I've worked in the last number of years, and that's well over 30 years, one of the issues we do have to deal with is the weather. It's either extremely hot or there's thunder showers or hailstorms at some point during the day. So we have to make sure that if we have to direct folks towards shelter for safety, that we have officers that are present and able to do that kind of stuff. There is no public fireworks display permitted as well. There is very strict regulations, and they're usually enforced by the city of Ottawa. And we don't have any indication of any specific BIA activities in the city of Ottawa itself. Next slide, please. Event planning section was the section that I had is continuously assessing the potential of impacts of visitors on Parliament Hill at downtown core. As it currently stands right now, we know there'll be a number of marches, some demonstrations taking place in and around the Parliament Hill. Our job is to support these folks in making sure that they attend Parliament Hill safely. They convey their messages to the public and the general public. We have a number of officers, as Chief Slowly pointed out earlier, that are assigned to the PLT, and their job is to act as a liaison to ensure folks understand where they want to, make sure the police understand where these folks want to go and how we can help them achieve their goals of showing up in the downtown or going towards Parliament Hill. We are aware that there are a number of people that will be attending patios in the market, Elgin Street, the bar districts. City bylaw will be working very closely with us, monitoring the crowds and ensuring that the regulations are being followed. We're also continuously doing an ongoing scan in terms of intelligence information that we would receive with respect to anything untowards that could happen within the Canada Day celebrations. There will be some private gatherings in private homes and probably some beaches, those types of situations. We're not intending on showing up in residences and counting heads or seeing how the celebrations are going. We're expecting everybody's going to behave accordingly, and we're going to monitor for everybody's safety in the crowded areas. I am aware that some jurisdictions, including Ottawa, had issues with crowds on beaches last year. We've been working in conjunction with city bylaw to ensure people are aware of the park closure hours and ensuring that there's no everybody can do so safely, go to a park. I went to a number of parks over the weekends. They were not that crowded. Families were having picnics in the parks, and that's basically what city parks are meant to be. Next crowd, thank you. So the planning and deployment is generally intelligence-based. There's been quite a number of officers. Every year we have to plan two types of operations. One is the Canada Day celebration, and the other one is the regular 911 response to calls when people call us and request emergency services. Those services will not be impacted. That's business as usual for them. We're just staffing for the crowds that potentially will show up in outskirts of the city looking to celebrate Canada Day, as well as the central downtown area. So subject to any questions, this is my presentation. Any questions from anybody, please?
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm looking to the board members. Are there any questions on the presentation? Okay, seeing none, thank you again for the presentation. We appreciate it, and I hope we have a safe and uneventful day.
Thank you for the invite.
Okay, received on the report. Thank you. Okay, item number 6. And this item, 2021-2023 Strategic Direction for the Ottawa Police Service Semi-Annual Report. That item was held by Member Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Just with respect to number 7 in that report, which is titled Intelligence-Led Policing. And it raises some red flags when we see the term intelligence-led. And I think, as the chief has mentioned, the first question I'd have is whose intelligence? Is this the intelligence of the people that perhaps got it wrong in the last time around? And so as a board member, I'm just wondering first of all, I'm just wondering if this term, its time has come to an end, and maybe we shouldn't be using it anymore, because it's kind of like smart planning. Everybody wants something to be smart. Everybody wants something to be intelligence-led. But what does that really mean? And when we have a neighborhood pilot that is intelligence-led, I think what we really, as a board, need to know is whose intelligence and how's that being determined. So I'm just a comment for the chief. And Chief, I know you share this because you've made the same comments. So I think if there's just some way that we can be assured that we're not just throwing a term around to try to impress people, that the board is going to be aware of where that intelligence came from and how it's appropriate for what you wish to accomplish, so that we're comfortable with it. I'm much more comfortable with the term community safety and well-being. It's pretty hard to argue against that term. It's the other one that I have a little bit of trouble with. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smallwood. Language is powerful, and there are terms that were maybe appropriate when they were first invented, but are less so now. And I recognize you could say that for almost anything that comes into the policing and justice sphere these days. Something as innocuous as school resource officer has become very loaded these days. So we'll be mindful of language, but as you have talked about, as I explained briefly earlier on during the delegations, we are overhauling what has been a traditional approach to intelligence-led policing. And it will be specifically aligned to the new requirements of the Police Services Act, and specifically to be aligned to community safety and well-being planning, which by definition is community-led, police-supported. The intelligence that we will be utilizing will be largely that which the community brings to that planning process, to the risk management processes, to the intervention plans, to the evaluation process. In the meeting that we had with our VAW community last week, we talked about an integrated model, very similar to the presentation we had earlier on during the delegations, where rather than the police responding to certain calls for service around domestic violence, potentially you could set up a group of non-police actors in that area. But again, that would be dependent on our ability to share information, to do joint threat assessments, to do joint dispatching, and then to be able to do evaluations jointly after the fact, sharing accountability, and yes, sharing information and resources. So it is very much a departure from the past and an entering into the new approach to community safety well-being. We are still stuck with the language of the past while we create new language, co-create new language going forward, but it is not our intent to recreate past mistakes. It is our intent to co-create with the community new approaches to achieve community safety and well-being.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay. Anything further from anyone on this item? Received on item 6? Received?
Received.
Thank you. Item number 7, Professional Standards Unit 2020 Annual Report. Member Smallwood, you had a question.
Yes. When looking through the report, one thing that stood out was a 24% increase in public complaints in the Professional Standards Unit Annual Report. And I just wondered if the chief had any comments as to what might have explained why there would be such a sort of marked increase in public complaints? And perhaps that's an unfair question because I realize it may be a very complex answer, but it certainly did stand out when I was looking through the report.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Smallwood. There could be a wide variety of reasons. I think we could all understand 2020 was a remarkably challenging year, and one in which a wide group of people in community became very much more involved in, concerned with, and active in police oversight, police accountability. That said, there were changes in legislation, changes in procedure around the OIPRD, how they handle cases, and some of that relates to the increase. I'm not sure if Inspector Hugh O'Toole is available, who could provide a deeper dive into this report. If not, if you could pose it as an inquiry, then we will get back to you with a more specific and in-depth response. So if Hugh O'Toole is available. Okay, it doesn't appear that he is. So I just ask Chair Smallwood, Vice Chair Smallwood, if you still would like a deeper answer, we can put that as an inquiry to provide for you later.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'm happy the report be received.
Okay, so received on the report? Received.
Thank you.
Okay, and then item number 9, response to inquiry 1-21-08, May 2020, racist meme outcomes in light of recent TikTok video. Member Nerman, you held this item.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the response to my inquiry, which was raised earlier in the May, is not complete. I purposely asked the chief, and I can read it if you wish to, and that portion is not covered into the response given. And I can read the quote from my inquiry. While going through the records, I noticed that one of the OPS officer has been disciplined for circulating a meme with 11 pictures, for which the response has been given, so I'm fine. But I am interested to know that what happened to the meme which was circulated with 13 pictures later and or any other version or versions as well. Was a separate investigation undertaken for all of such meme or not in that regard? If yes, what we can expect when we can expect the final outcome. So that is a portion I'm interested to have the response from the OPS.
Chair Deans, I can respond to Member Nerman's question. It wasn't clear, but thank you for clarifying that. Member Nerman, we thought you wanted an update on the outcome of the initial meme. I can assure the board that every one of the memes that I'm aware of is under investigation or has been concluded in such a way as the first meme. So in regards to the other meme that was created and distributed, that is still an active investigation by the Professional Standards Unit. They have gone to great lengths to determine who constructed it, how far it was distributed. They've consulted with members of the community. They've interviewed a number of internal and external folks, and they have gone so far as to consider whether or not there are criminal code elements that could advance the investigation. That will remain an ongoing investigation until it's concluded one way or the other. Every meme that I'm aware of that has been created, every other conduct matter that involves the depiction or the communication of inappropriate, offensive, or otherwise acts contrary to the Police Service Act are under investigation by the Professional Standards Unit. I don't know if that answers your question, Member Nerman.
Thank you, Chief. And can you please ensure that once the investigation to the other meme is concluded, or you have that, you will share with the board in the due course?
I will do that in the right venue, but yes, I can commit to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So I can say that the item is received.
Okay, received on item number 9?
Yeah.
Received. Thank you. So this brings us to the end of our public meeting. Is there any other business anyone wanted to raise with us? Seeing none, this concludes our public meeting. Our next regular meeting will be held on July 26th at 4 p.m. The in-camera will again go at the beginning at noon, followed by the public meeting at 4. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So do.
Thank you, Member Nerman. All those in favor?
Yep.
Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Chair.
Well,
Chair, thank